Chapter 278. I'll be obedient in the future. Okay. I'll learn martial arts from Turin. I'll do everything you say. Okay. Every word was deeply ingrained in her heart. Every word was hoarse and choked with sobs. Speaking until here, Chu Qingyan hugged Xiao Su and cried out loud. Why did they have to go through so many hardships? Why was he always forced to choose the most difficult path in life when there were so many paths? Why was it so difficult to live a normal life? Big Ice Cube, you're too stupid. Why do you put the country, and the people in your heart? Our hearts are so small that it'll be crowded with 2 or 3 people. But you're holding on. Don't you feel tired? I know the pain in your heart. You've never enjoyed true family love since you were young, but don't always think about your father and mother. They're more important than you, so they can't see your good, your hard work, and your endurance. But Imperial Grandfather, me, my father, and my mother are all your family. If others don't want us, we don't want them. Isn't there a saying? Today, you ignore me. Tomorrow, I'll make you unworthy. Don't use other people's mistakes to punish yourself. Do your part. Do your part. Don't tire yourself too much. Time passed little by little, and the life of the person under her seemed to be draining away little by little. Chu Qingyan cried until her voice was hoarse, but she was even more panicked. What should I do? What should I do with you? The sound in the room came intermittently. Turin and the others who were standing outside the door seemed to be standing like tree stumps. The cold wind blew over them, but they didn't feel cold. Why did everything become like this? Hua Ling gritted his teeth, his eyes red. He still remembered that when they first left Jingdo, although they were full of grievances, they thought that leaving the prison of Jingdo was a kind of release for their master, so they suppressed their complaints about their whereabouts. But who knew that in just a few months, they would fall into a difficult situation? Their companions were either dead or injured, and their master's life was hanging by a thread. Actually, I should have guessed it long ago. Turin closed his eyes and blamed himself. Although Master has been resisting the enemy all the way, the tactics he adopted were not as good as before. At that time, I thought it was because Master was too tired from dealing with official affairs and neglected to plan. Now that I think about it, I understand that Master at that time had already planned to not go back. Why didn't you say anything? Why did you stop him? Hua Ling charged forward and grabbed Turin's collar, his eyes almost popping out of their sockets. Turin's hands hung on both sides of his body. His expression was pained. I also hate myself. Why didn't I discover it earlier? Perhaps this wouldn't have happened. But at that time, his master had already made up his mind. Would his words be of any use? What are you two doing? Master's life or death is unknown inside. Yet you're fighting amongst yourselves? If Master finds out, how are you going to explain it to him? After separating the two of them, the wood spirit was already mentally and physically exhausted. When she saw this scene, she felt even worse and couldn't help but reprimand. If Master finds out, even if he sends me to the torture room, I'm willing. Hua Ling's hand grabbed the tree trunk, as if he wanted to make a hole in it. When this was said, Turin and the wood spirit were both silent. They suddenly felt that in front of the death god, all human and material resources were useless. There was not much time left. Chu Qingyan lay on his chest, her eyes staring blankly. She had already said everything that she needed to say, but it was to no avail. She knew that once he made a decision, it would be hard to change it, but this habit was not good. At least it wasn't good right now. What should she do? She felt like she was being forced into a desperate situation. She suddenly thought of the past. Whenever she wanted the big ice cube to change his mind, she would always drag herself into the water. So she leaned over to his ear and softly said, "Big Ice Cube, it's fine. It's fine if you don't want to stay. I'll go with you. I'm too stupid. Since you don't like this world, then I'll accompany you in reincarnation. Why should I force you to stay, right? It's fine to go somewhere else. As long as I'm by your side, there's no meaning to life without you." As soon as her voice fell, the large hand she was holding suddenly grabbed her. Chu Qingyan almost cried because of his actions. But she couldn't let down her guard. She had to add more fire to his heart. "You're holding my hand so tightly. Are you afraid that I'll get lost? It's fine, walk slowly. I'll catch up to you later." I just found out from Big Sister Yin Luo that there's a kind of herb that can let a person die in their sleep without feeling any pain. Wait a moment. I'll go find her to get it. Chu Qingyin pretended to get up, but the hand that was firmly holding her suddenly pulled, causing her to fall onto his body, but she cleverly avoided his wound. She just happened to be close to his chest, so she could feel his weak heartbeat, which she couldn't hear earlier, start to beat normally again. Her heart was filled with joy, and hot tears filled her eyes. Big Ice Cube, do you not want to leave? The person lying there quietly didn't answer her. What replied her was his increasingly stable heartbeat. Huling, Turin, quickly go and call Big Sister Yin Luo. His Highness's breathing has recovered. The people waiting outside were startled when they heard this, but they quickly reacted and responded loudly, then quickly went to call for help. In the corridor, Chung Yinluo leaned against a pillar, lazily looking at the other side of the mountain. Xiaofeng saw her and walked over. Senior sister, aren't you tired? Why aren't you resting? What are you thinking about here? I'm thinking about how to control the poison in Xiao Su's body. Chung Yinluo yawned, then unhurriedly replied, What's the use of thinking about this? He might not be able to make it. Xiaofeng shook his head, laughing at her useless effort. Chung Yinluo supported her chin with one hand. Her previous sleepiness was swept away, and her eyes were filled with interest. No, I think that little girl will pull him back at the gates of hell. Why do you think so? Xiaofeng was a little surprised. Because Chung Yinluo paused, then smiled slyly. A woman's intuition. A woman's intuition? What the hell was that? Xiaofeng expressed his confusion. At this moment, Huiling's anxious footsteps came from afar. When he saw Chung Yinluo, he immediately rushed over. Miss Chung, my master has already regained consciousness. Xiaofeng's jaw almost dropped when he heard this. Chung Yinluo smiled, not surprised at all. She stretched out her hand and lightly tapped her temple, then said to Xiaofeng, See, this is a woman's intuition. Before Xiaofeng could regain his senses, he heard his senior sister's laughing voice. Little Ten, you can start brewing the medicine again? Yes. Little Ten replied loudly. Chapter 279. Not long after Chu Qingyin called out, Chung Yinluo came in. Sister Yinluo, I've done it. Now I can help His Highness delay the poison. I'm counting on you. Chu Qingyin said impatiently. Chung Yinluo's gaze swept over the tightly clasped hands, then landed on Xiao Su's body. She leaned over to check. Chu Qingyin wanted to get up and give her the position, but she found that the big ice cube's grip on her hand was too strong. She couldn't break free no matter how hard she tried. Chu Qingyin rubbed her head in embarrassment. You're quite strong. It seems like you don't want to commit suicide anymore. Chung Yinluo smiled and teased. She didn't check and directly said to Little Sure, Bring the medicine up? This is. Chu Qingyin looked at the medicine in her hand and felt that the smell was somewhat familiar. This is the medicine that was brewed again. His Highness has vomited all the medicine that he drank before. Little Sure explained with a smile. Didn't you say that there was only enough herbs to brew one bowl? Chu Qingyin glanced at Chung Yinluo. She felt that the most important thing right now was the big ice cube's body. She didn't ask anything and sat back down on the bed. Xiaofeng, who knew his senior sister well, knew what was going on when he saw Chu Qingyin's expression. He couldn't help coughing lightly. Actually, their medical hall had sufficient herbs for this prescription, but in order to ensure that the patient's family members didn't waste the medicine, senior sister had to instruct her junior brothers and sisters. There was once a family member who questioned her, but senior sister had lightly retorted. What? Don't you know that wasting is a very shameful thing? That was how senior sister's reputation for being stingy and stingy spread. That's right, we've delayed for too long. We have to feed him the medicine immediately. If he doesn't drink the entire bowl of medicine within the time it takes to brew a cup of tea, then Chung Yinluo shrugged, indicating that they should all understand the subtext. Thus, she sauntered out the door. Xiaofeng frowned. Was senior sister trying to fool him again? Huiling and the others immediately turned their eyes to the two people on the bed. Strictly speaking, it should be their little princess. Chu Qingyin, who was holding a straw, froze when she heard Chung Yinluo's words. It was impossible to use a straw. However, with so many expectant gazes in front of her, Chu Qingyin immediately felt the pressure. She suddenly remembered the last method. However, with so many pairs of eyes glaring at her, she felt a little awkward. Turin, you guys go out first. Although Tu Ling and the others were a little confused, they still obediently left the room and closed the door. When only she and Xiao Su were left in the room, Chu Qingyin looked at the bowl and took a deep breath. She muttered to herself, "Big ice cube, I didn't mean to take advantage of you. The situation is special, so we have to deal with it specially." With that, she swallowed the medicine in one gulp. Then, she leaned forward and kissed his thin lips. When their lips touched, the soft touch made her tremble uncontrollably. She didn't expect that the usually cold and indifferent person's lips would be so soft. It was like a jelly in the modern world. She couldn't help but want to take a bite. Chu Qingyin was startled by the sudden thought in her mind. How could she let her imagination run wild at this time? She immediately dispelled those charming thoughts in her mind. There was no time for her to hesitate. She closed her eyes and found a position on his lips. At first, she felt that the big ice cube was resisting. However, she didn't know why, but when she was anxious to leave and land on his lips again, he finally let go. She immediately took the opportunity to carefully use her tongue to pry open his lips and teeth. Then, she slowly passed the medicine in her mouth into his mouth. After feeding him in one gulp, she immediately raised her head and drank a big gulp. She repeated the action just now. Soon, she finished feeding him the medicine in the bowl. Just now, Sha Feng said that after feeding him the medicine, if the dark purple color on his lips faded, it meant that the poison was under control. Therefore, Chu Qingyin immediately stared at his lips. After a while, his lips really did turn light black. Chu Qingyin was happy in her heart. However, after the great joy, she was deeply tired. She laid on his chest and said softly, "Big ice cube, I'm really happy that you stayed for me just now. I told you that you don't have nothing. You still have me? Living is not an easy thing. Don't believe that there is reincarnation in this world. Grasping the present is the most important thing." In her daze, she didn't know what she said, but a thought floated in her mind. It seemed like the one being taken advantage of wasn't the big ice cube, but herself. But just as she was about to fall asleep, she was suddenly awakened by herself. No, she couldn't sleep yet. She still had things to do. After settling the big ice cube, Chu Qingyin stood up and walked out of the room. At this time, the first ray of morning light pierced through the clouds and shone on the ground. Chu Qingyin looked at the sunlight. Although the morning sun was still cold, she felt a little warm. They had finally passed the darkness and waited for dawn. All the waiting was worth it. Little Tin was standing at the door. Chu Qingyin lowered her head and asked with a smile, "Little Tin, where's your senior sister?" "Oh, it's already opened, but senior sister should be in the backyard." Little Tin shook his head and said. Chu Qingyin nodded and smiled. "Little Tin, help me take care of His Highness first. I'll go look for your senior sister. I'll be back soon." "Okay, leave it to me." Little Tin patted his chest. Chu Qingyin looked at the little boy, who was not even 7 years old, doing this. Although it was a little funny, he looked very cute. She reached out and patted his head, smiling as she thanked him. Chu Qingyin followed her memory and found the backyard. At this time, Chung Yinluo was holding a small hoe and weeding the herb garden. When she raised her hand to wipe her sweat, she saw Chu Qingyin slowly walking over. She stopped and supported herself with the hoe with one hand. She smiled and teased, "What are you doing here instead of accompanying His Highness?" When Chu Qingyin heard this, she couldn't help but think of the matter of feeding the medicine just now. Her face couldn't help but turn red. She coughed lightly to cover it up, then said, "What are you doing here?" "Weeding." Chung Yinluo spread out her hands. "Usually, when my mind is in a mess and I don't have a clue, I'll come here to weed to calm myself down." Chu Qingyin knew that she was troubled by the method of detoxifying Big Ice Cube. She said sincerely, "Thank you for being willing to help us, Sister Yinluo. What's there to thank me for? I'm not detoxifying you for free. When the time comes, the waiting fee will be the same. You can't go back on your word, Chung Yinluo said nonchalantly. Then she smiled at Chu Qingyan. Besides, didn't you already guess that I would agree to help you? Chu Qingyan didn't feel embarrassed at being seen through. Instead, she said generously, because I believe that a kind person won't be cold-blooded and heartless. Isn't that right, Sister Yinluo? Chu Qingyan smiled brightly at her. Chung Yinluo glanced at her. Why did she feel that her bright smile was so dazzling? Chapter 280. You little brat. You really know how to read people's minds. If you're already like this at such a young age, how will you harm others when you grow up? Chung Yinluo couldn't help but reach out to pinch her little face. She had wanted to do this for a long time. This water spirit's delicate skin really made people green with envy. Chu Qingyan cried out in pain from the pinch. She finally managed to free her little face from Chung Yinluo's hands, only to see Chung Yinluo pointing at her face and laughing hysterically. Chu Qingyan followed her gaze and touched her face. When she opened her hands, she saw that they were full of mud. She couldn't help but blush with shame. What a strange older sister. She was just a likable older sister. All right, I'm not going to talk to you anymore. I'm too tired after a night of torment. I'm going to catch up on some sleep. You can do whatever you want. Don't bother me if there's nothing important. Chung Yinluo stuffed the hoe in her hand into her hand, yawned, and left leisurely. Chu Qingyan looked at the receding figure, and then at the hoe in her hand. She suddenly felt like crying, but had no tears. The sky gradually brightened, and even the mountains in the distance could be seen clearly. Chu Qingyan gripped the hoe in her hand tightly and smiled slightly. Actually, the words she had said to Chung Yinluo and the fact that she had stayed outside the door was actually a gamble. She felt that she had a chance of winning, but she wasn't completely sure at that time. She hated gambling with her life, but at that time, she had no other way out and could only struggle for survival. Fortunately, she believed in the pureness of human nature and was right. She hoped that Sister Yinluo would be able to find the antidote within 3 days. After pondering for a while, she slowly walked back with the hoe in her hand. When she reached a large tree, she was startled by the sudden appearance of someone. It was ethereal, dressed in white. Chu Qingyan patted her chest and sighed. Ethereal, do you know that my heart is very weak now? I can't take any more shocks. Can you please make some noise when you walk? Ethereal replied apologetically. This subordinate didn't mean to. I heard that Master almost couldn't suppress the snake's kiss poison. How are you now? It's under control. You don't have to worry. Chu Qingyan hugged the hoe and comforted her. She could feel that Ethereal had changed a lot overnight. Her expression was a little bleak, and there was a faint melancholy between her brows. That's good. Ethereal breathed a sigh of relief. Chu Qingyan saw his hesitant expression and knew that he still had something to ask, so she didn't rush to leave. Ethereal hesitated for a long time before asking, is my junior sister doing well? Chu Qingyan raised her eyebrows. Ethereal, I think you'd better ask the person in question. Because I've never seen her in the past, I don't know if she's good or bad compared to her past. Ethereal's eyes immediately darkened. Young consort is right, but it's not suitable for me to disturb her now. It's not up to you to decide whether it's suitable or not. Chu Qingyan raised a finger and shook it. If there's no obsession in one's heart, one won't always remember the past. I think if there's any misunderstanding, it's better to resolve it. We can consider whether we should help each other in need or forget each other in the pugilistic world. As soon as she finished speaking, Chu Qingyan didn't see Ethereal's transformation. Instead, he looked at her in horror. Is there something wrong with what I said? Chu Qingyan was at a loss as to what was going on. Young consort, you know so much. Ethereal still looked like he'd seen a ghost. Think about it, a 10-year-old girl chatting with you and teaching you about love between men and women. Wasn't that too sensational? Young consort was too precocious. Wasn't she? Chu Qingyan's mouth twitched. It's over. She forgot that she was still a 10-year-old child. Was it really good to be exposed so quickly? What's that? I suddenly remembered that His Highness needs someone to take care of him. I'll go back first. Chu Qingyan stuffed the hoe in her hand into his hand and then slipped away. After going around in circles, her host still fell into his hands. Just like some people, even if they went in a big circle, they still had to return to the same place to find the person they'd lost. Noon. Chung Yinluo woke up from her sleep and stretched. After washing up, she felt refreshed. She sat back on the chair and opened the medical book on the table. Now that her thoughts were back, she could start studying the detoxification method of snakebite poison. After flipping through half of the book, there was a light knock on the door. She didn't raise her head and said, "Come in." Xiao came in with a plate of food. "Senior sister, I didn't see you come out to eat at lunchtime, so I brought this over. You're so considerate. If you get married in the future, I won't have anyone to order around." Chung Yinluo expressed that the future was very distressing. Xiao placed the food on her table and said helplessly, "Senior sister, it's time for you to find a husband. Otherwise, I can't serve you for the rest of my life." Chung Yinluo raised her head and looked at him lovingly with her watery eyes. "There's a good saying, if I'm not married and you're not married, why don't we be together?" As soon as she said that, there seemed to be something outside the windowsill that made a sound. Xiao immediately ran over and stuck his head out to take a look. He saw that a pot of medicinal herbs had fallen over, and there was no one around. He couldn't help but scratch his head. Could it be that stray cat again? He turned around as he thought about it. When he met Senior Sister's gaze, he suddenly felt a little scared. "Senior Sister, I'm panicking when you look at me like that." "Panicking?" Chung Yinluo retracted her gaze and said speechlessly, "You can't even take a joke. Forget it, forget it. You'd better hurry up and find a husband and get married." "Senior Sister, I'm a man." Xiao pursed his lips. I know. Why are you shouting so loudly? Are you trying to make me deaf?" Chung Yinluo picked at her ears and said in disdain. Xiao suddenly felt so miserable that he wanted to squat in the corner and draw circles. However, he remembered the important matter. "Senior Sister, can you really find a way to cure the snakebite poison in 3 days?" Chung Yinluo continued to flip through the medical book in her hand and replied, "Back then, my father devoted himself to researching the antidotes for the 10 deadly poisons. In fact, he wasn't only able to develop 3 of them. It was because my father's good friend was critically ill at that time. He didn't have time to continue his research and left. Although he left in a hurry, he left some manuscripts with ideas on how to cure the snakebite poison. Now that these manuscripts are in my hands and I've been organizing them, I have a rough idea in mind. It's just that I haven't put it into practice yet." "I see. Then the King of England's poisoning gives you a chance to cure the poison." Xiao nodded. Chung Yinluo's finger tapped lightly on one of the pages. Suddenly, an idea flashed through her mind and the corners of her lips curled up slightly. "I think I don't need 3 days. 1 day should be enough." Chapter 281. Chu Qingyin sat on the bed, wiping the sweat off Xiao Su's face from time to time. His fever hadn't subsided after taking the medicine this morning, but as the medicine began to take effect, his body began to sweat and his body temperature gradually returned to normal. She leaned over and reached out to touch his forehead. Finally, it wasn't as hot as before, and she was relieved. After retracting her hand, she looked at the person on the bed seriously. His long and thick eyelashes were curled up. She didn't pay much attention to them before, but now she felt that they were unusually good-looking. They were even longer and clearer than a girl's. She wanted to put some matches on his eyelashes to see how many matches she could put. Even as a girl, she felt a little jealous. His pale cheeks, due to excessive blood loss, looked sickly beautiful. His dark lips were slightly pursed, and the lines of his lips were clear and charming. Suddenly, she felt that the usually cold and hard big block of ice actually had an enchanting and sexy side to him. Sure enough, when a person was sick and weak, they showed their most real side. When she looked at his lips, she couldn't help but think of the medicine he gave her this morning. Her cheeks heated up again. This was the first time she had intimate contact with a man. She had lived for 20 years and had never been in a relationship. The men around her who liked her always ended up becoming her male best friends for various reasons. She had once been teased by her roommates because her aura was too strong. Those men couldn't stand her, so they all gave up and left. At that time, she felt extremely wronged. It was only because she was in an important position, whether it was the student council, the club, or the class, that she had to do things neatly. So when she was serious, she was described as domineering. But when she wasn't serious, she was also soft and easy to bully. But for some reason, when she transmigrated into Sui's body, she didn't have any responsibilities, and her life was much more relaxed than before. Chu Qingyin shifted her gaze from Xiao Su and covered her eyes in embarrassment. Sigh. Was it because she had focused on her studies and work in the past and hadn't had intimate contact with the opposite sex? Was that why her mind was in such a mess now? But what Chu Qingyin didn't know was that, in many cases, falling in love with a person started from a small conflict. Was it just a kiss? It was just a light touch. Conflict my ass. No, it seemed like there was more than one. Bang! At this moment, the sound of the door being pushed open was heard. Chu Qingyin, whose soul had drifted away, was so frightened that she almost fell off the bed. Cheng Yinluo pushed the door open and saw Chu Qingyin, looking like she had seen a ghost. She scratched her head and said, "Why do you look like this? Are you stunned by this sister's fairy-like appearance?" Chu Qingyin straightened her clothes and shook her head solemnly at the end of her sentence, as well as the slight upturn in the corner of her eyes. "This sister is so scary." "That's good." Cheng Yinluo walked into the room leisurely. Chu Qingyin stood up, somewhat puzzled by her arrival at this time. She clearly said in the morning that she was going to catch up on sleep. At this time, a bold guess flashed through his mind. "Sister Yinluo, have you made any progress in the antidote for the snake's kiss poison?" she probed. Cheng Yinluo walked around the room and stood in front of her. She looked at her with a hint of admiration in her eyes. "Not bad. You're quite smart." When Chu Qingyin heard this, her heart was filled with joy. She was so excited that before she could find her voice, she saw Cheng Yinluo raise 2 fingers and wave them in front of her eyes. "I came here today to tell you 2 pieces of news. One is good news, and the other is bad news. Which one do you want to hear first?" Chu Qingyin was stunned. This scene was so familiar. It was often played out on TV. Good news generally represented what one wanted to do the most at that moment, but bad news would make one fall from joy to hell. Now that it happened to him, he had a bad feeling about it. "Let's hear the good news first." Chu Qingyin didn't hesitate. She had to at least confirm whether the big ice cube could cure the poison. Cheng Yinluo nodded and walked back and forth in front of her with her hands behind her back. She said unhurriedly, "I've found the antidote for the snake's kiss poison." It wasn't difficult to find the antidote based on her father's handwritten letter and her previous understanding of poisons. However, the difficult part was Chu Qingyin clasped her hands together. She was overjoyed. The big ice cube's poison could finally be cured. This arduous journey wasn't in vain. However, she didn't dare to celebrate too early. What about the bad news? Cheng Yinluo was a little surprised by the little girl's lack of joy. She was really a little girl who was good at hiding her true feelings. She stood in front of her and said in a low voice, "Although we've found a way to cure the poison, it's difficult to gather the herbs needed to cure the poison. If they had the antidote but didn't have the herbs, it was equivalent to not being able to decipher it. What herbs do you need?" Chu Qingyin didn't feel dejected and immediately asked. The snake's kiss poison was developed from the venom of the king of snakes. Although the snake king's entire body is highly toxic, there is always something that can subdue another in this world. There will always be something that can subdue it. Thus, the snake king is most afraid of 3 things in this world. The first is the ice crystal flower, the second is the redstone fruit, and the last is the love leaf. These 3 are called the 3 holy flowers and fruit leaves. However, they are very rare and only exist in medical books. They're basically extinct in this world, because the conditions for survival of these 3 plants are very harsh. The ice crystal flower needs the coldest place to take root and germinate. The redstone fruit comes from the redstone flower, but the redstone flower only bears fruit once every 30 years. The love leaf is even more difficult to find because it grows day by day and night by night. Cheng Yinluo recalled the records in the medical books and slowly explained it to her. It could be said that the snake's kiss poison was the collection of the rarest herbs in the history of medicine. Chu Qingyin couldn't help but widen her eyes. She didn't know much about medicine, but that didn't stop her from understanding. These 3 herbs sounded really hard to find. She couldn't help but want to roar at the sky. After torturing the big ice cube for so long, why didn't it let her go? Could it be that it's blind? Can't it see, such a righteous person? Her heart was surging with emotions, but what came surging was sorrow. No, she wouldn't give up so quickly. Having the antidote is a good start. Sister Yinluo, do you know where these 3 herbs can be found? Chu Qingyin took a deep breath and looked up at her. Chung Yinluo nodded with satisfaction. I like your stubbornness. Although she was very anxious, she couldn't help but sweat when she heard Chung Yinluo's description. Stubbornness? Was it really a compliment? These 3 herbs haven't appeared for a long time. I don't know where they are either. Chung Yinluo shrugged. Even you don't know where they are? Chu Qingyin frowned. That was going to be difficult. Don't be so impatient. I'm not done yet. Chung Yinluo stretched out her finger and shook it. I suddenly thought of something. What is it? Chapter 282. She was as anxious as a cat on a hot tin roof, but Chung Yinyin's habit of speaking in riddles was unbearable for her. Chung Yinluo felt that the little girl had been teased enough, so she decided not to beat around the bush. She smiled and said directly, I remember that before my father left for his travels, he handed over the entire sect to me and gave me a box. He said that there was a detoxifying fruit inside. I didn't notice it at the time, but now that I think about it, it might be the red flower fruit. Chung Yinluo's words ignited the hope in Chu Qingyin's eyes. Sister Yinluo, can you go back and see if the box is still there? If that's the case, then we have one of the 3 most difficult to find herbs. Chu Qingyin suddenly felt that her words were a little abrupt. Chung Yinluo had only mentioned it and didn't say that she would give it to her. After all, the red flower fruit was so precious. How could she give it to her so easily? Chu Qingyin hesitated for a moment, then pursed her lips and said, Sister Yinluo, I'm sorry. I was a little anxious. Chung Yinluo knew what she meant and couldn't help laughing. Why are you thinking so much? Although I'm a little stingy, I didn't promise you that I would save your life. Besides, we haven't confirmed it yet, so don't be so happy. Chu Qingyin heard this and smiled. Touched, she said, Sister Yinluo, you are such a nice person. Chung Yinluo immediately retreated. No, no, no. Don't praise me. I can't stand these things. Wait here, I'll go back and find out where it is. With that, she turned around and left the room. Chu Qingyin looked at Chung Yinluo's departing figure and felt a sense of gratitude. She walked back to the bed and continued to nag at Big Ice Cube. Big Ice Cube, although there are many unfair and unexpected things in our lives, we will meet some good people from time to time. Sister Yinluo seems to be a woman of her words, but she's a good girl with a sharp tongue but a soft heart. I don't know why she misunderstood you. If you wake up in the future and have a chance, you should explain it to her and resolve the misunderstanding. Maybe then everyone will be happy. Besides, Sister Yinluo is such a good person. Why did Ethereal betray her in the first place? Actually, I don't know what happened between the 2 of them, but if the 2 of them can bury the hatchet and get back together, that would be even better. The man is handsome and delicate, and the woman is bright and generous. They look like a good match. Sigh, you're in such a dangerous situation right now, and I still want to be your matchmaker. Chu Qingyin shook her head and laughed at herself. In fact, she was just trying to find joy in the midst of bitterness. Waiting was an unbearable thing. If she did not distract herself, she would definitely let her imagination run wild. Just as she was feeling vexed and self-deprecating, the large hand in her hand suddenly grabbed her. She was shocked as she looked at the slowly closing fingers in surprise. She immediately raised her head to look at the person on the bed, but to her disappointment, the big ice cube's eyes were still tightly shut. Ever since he had fainted in the cave, he had not woken up again. This morning, he had regained consciousness, but he still did not wake up. Chu Qingyin pressed her face against the back of his hand. Big Ice Cube, are you comforting me? Relax, I'm not that weak. No matter if it's in heaven or earth, no matter if it's a mountain of blades or a sea of flames, no matter how difficult it is. I will help you gather all the herbs and help you cure the poison. Even if I have to sacrifice everything, I want you to live. Before that, you just need to properly rest. You don't need to worry about anything. I will help you take care of everything." After a while, Xiao Su seemed to sense her thoughts and slowly let go of her hand. Chu Qingyin revealed a faint smile. After a moment of silence, there was a knock on the door. Chu Qingyin straightened up and said, "Come in." Turin and Hualing walked in together. "What is it?" Chu Qingyin was puzzled. "Little princess, today we contacted Water Spirit. She sent a message to tell us that we don't know how the news of Master's disappearance came to light. Right now, His Majesty has ordered the local government to search for Master's whereabouts. At the same time, people have been sent from the capital to search. What should we do now? Should we get in touch with the local government?" The Earth Spirit reported. Chu Qingyin instantly furrowed her brows. From the attack on the big ice cube to his disappearance, it had only been a short 3 to 4 days. How could the capital have received the news so quickly? Could it be that the saying that the mountain was high and the emperor was far away was just a lie? Did every emperor have spies all over the country? Suddenly, Chu Qingyin remembered the conversation between the big ice cube and the cloaked person in the rain. She hadn't paid attention to it at the time, but thinking about it now, she felt that there was a hidden meaning behind those words. Could it be that the cloaked person was related to the imperial family? This thought made her body freeze. Although it was very bold of her to think this. But what if the truth was like this? No, she couldn't risk the big ice cube's life. Don't contact him yet. His Highness is poisoned right now. If his whereabouts are leaked, it will be very disadvantageous for us. Chu Qingyin made a prompt decision. Turin looked at her in surprise. He had thought that the little Wang Fei would seek the protection of the local officials, but he hadn't thought that her thoughts were so cautious. He nodded. This subordinate also thinks so. Turin's reply also surprised Chu Qingyin. She couldn't help but think that Turin had come to ask for her opinion, because he also had suspicions about the imperial family. This made her even more convinced of the cloaked person's origins. But now that the Sichuan emperor had given the order, how could she waste this opportunity? Chu Qingyin's eyes flashed and a sly smile appeared on her lips. Although our whereabouts can't be leaked, it doesn't mean that we can't leak the whereabouts of those assassins. They caused us so much trouble, so they should suffer a bit and have a taste of being coveted by others. Turin, think of a way to leak the information of those enemies to the local officials. Yes, when those local officials heard the order from the capital, in order to find the whereabouts of their masters, they were eager to gain merit. Once they heard that there were rebels attacking their masters, in order to steal merit, they would definitely send out troops to capture them. At that time, those assassins would be like rats on the street. Not only would they be able to get their revenge, they would also be able to slow down the enemy's footsteps, making them unable to take care of themselves and have no energy to chase after them. Turin and Hualing looked at each other. They suddenly felt that the little Wang Fei in front of them wasn't as innocent and naive as before. When she acted cute, no one could beat her. When she played tricks, she was incomparably cunning. They suddenly felt a little worried for their master's future. After Turin and Hualing left, Chu Qingyin raised her eyebrows. What was with their expressions just now? Could it be that I'm a scourge? Chapter 283. After leaving Xiao Su's room, Cheng Yinluo went back to her own room. As soon as she entered the room, she began to feel troubled. Where did she put the box? She remembered that she was annoyed by the old man's long-winded nagging, so she threw the box into the room. Now, she didn't know if she could find it. She suddenly felt a little depressed. Forget it, let's find it first. Thus, she rolled up her sleeves and began to search. After a while, Xiaofeng knocked on the door and entered. He saw his senior sister rummaging through the boxes and cabinets. Senior sister, what are you doing? I'm looking for a box to confirm if it contains the redstone fruit. All right, why are you looking for me? Why don't you find a place to sit? Cheng Yinluo was too busy to bother with him. Xiaofeng stood outside the door and didn't enter at all. He scanned the room. Was his senior sister sure that there was still room to walk? Forget it, he'd better stand outside and say, Senior sister, Junior sister little Xiao, just went through the accounts book and said that our sect's income this month can't make ends meet. Now, the remaining silver in the storehouse is not enough to support next month's expenses. She asked if we have any solutions. When Cheng Yinluo heard this, her fingers paused in the middle of rummaging. She slowly stood up and looked defeated. I remember that not long ago, I treated a wealthy businessman and received a lot of consultation fees. So soon, we're out of money again? Sha Feng looked at his senior sister helplessly. Senior sister, you must have remembered wrongly. That wealthy businessman happened last month. In the past, you said that you don't accept consultation fees from the poor or only accept payment for medicine. Now that our medical center is becoming more and more famous, many people are coming because of our reputation and we're taking in more and more poor patients. Basically, we're giving away good herbs for free, so our medical center can't sustain itself anymore. His senior sister was kind-hearted, but she couldn't handle so many people. If this continued, their medical center might close down and the entire sect might. He originally wanted to delay this matter for a while, but now that it was getting more and more urgent, he had no choice but to report it to his senior sister. Cheng Yinluo's expression changed slightly. She raised her hand and held her forehead weakly. I understand. I'll think of a way to deal with this matter. Sha Feng glanced at her. He knew in his heart that it was already very difficult for a weak woman like her to support the entire sect. He didn't want to add to her troubles, so he nodded and left. The sound of footsteps behind her gradually faded away. Cheng Yinluo sighed softly. Her father had left without a word and left such a big sect to her. She had been supporting it for so many years, but she didn't expect it to end up like this. She slapped her forehead. Forget it. Let's deal with the matter at hand first. Just as she bent down, she saw a reddish-brown wooden box lying quietly under the bed. She suddenly smiled. She finally found this little thing. Cheng Yinluo took out the wooden box and opened it, ignoring the dust on her body. There was a fist-sized red fruit inside, covered with a thin layer of silver powder. She recognized the silver powder. It was ground from primrose grass and used to store the red flower fruit so that it wouldn't rot. Primrose grass was extremely precious and hard to find even with 1,000 gold coins. Now that it had been used to store this fruit, it went without saying that this was the red stone fruit. She couldn't help but smile. It seemed that the old man had really left something good for her. TSK, TSK, TSK. She heard that the King of England had been conferred titles and rewards all year round, so his family must be well off. Since she had saved him, it wasn't excessive to exchange a fruit for some silver taels and let him bleed a little. She gently tossed the box in her hand, and her eyes revealed a sly look like a fox. The little girl in the room must be waiting anxiously. She didn't think much and stepped out of the room. Just as she passed through the long corridor and arrived at the small bamboo garden, Cheng Yinluo suddenly stopped. 10 steps in front of her, there was a figure standing with his back to her. He was handsome and slender, and his white robe fluttered. He was still the same person from her memory. But for some reason, she had an illusion that things were still the same, but he had changed. Her eyes were slightly hot, as if something was about to rush out. No, she had once told herself that if they met again, her eyes wouldn't turn red. He wasn't worth any of her tears. As if sensing her gaze, the person slowly turned around. Junior sister, long time no see. Cheng Yinluo's eyes suddenly narrowed. The touch of red in her eyes had disappeared because of this familiar voice. Ethereal looked deeply at her. His eyes were full of nostalgia, reluctance, and regret. But when he saw the vigilant and cold look of the person in front of him, his pupils involuntarily shrank. She still held a grudge against him for what had happened in the past. Sir, you've got the wrong person. I'm the eldest disciple in our sect, so I don't have any senior brothers or sisters, Cheng Yinluo said coldly. Ethereal sighed. Xiao Yin, I'm Morong Ju, the eldest disciple of the 13th generation. No matter how much you resent me, this is a fact that can't be changed. That was in the past. Ever since you betrayed the sect, I didn't acknowledge your existence. When I took over the position of managing the sect from my father, I removed your name from the list. You used to be my disciple, but you're no longer my disciple now. Also, I'm not familiar with you. so you can't call me Xiao Yin. After Cheng Yin Luo finished speaking, she wanted to walk around him, but Ethereal reached out and stopped her. Xiao Yin, can you really not forgive me for what happened in the past? The coldness in Xiao Yan's eyes made his heart clench uncontrollably. Although he had imagined in the past thousands of days that she would definitely hate him when they met again, when the day really came, he realized that no matter how much mental preparation he had made, a single look from her could easily break down his defenses. In the past? What happened in the past? Why don't I know about it? Cheng Yin Luo turned around and asked sarcastically. She seemed to be a little impatient with his pestering. Murongju, why are you approaching me now? You're a real man. If you have something to say, say it directly. There's no need to flatter me. Ethereal was slightly stunned. He smiled bitterly and said, Xiao Yin, I do have a favor to ask of you this time. As soon as he finished speaking, a touch of pain flashed through Cheng Yin Luo's eyes. Sure enough, he didn't come back out of his own heart. Just like when he first joined the sect, he came back with a purpose. Say it? She resisted the urge to turn around and leave, and said without a change in her expression. Ethereal took a deep breath and looked at her again. I heard from Sha Feng that 3 rare medicinal herbs are needed to detoxify the snake's kiss poison. I remember that master said that he obtained a redstone fruit by accident. Now that he has handed the sect over to you, he should have given you the redstone fruit as well. So, Ethereal lowered his eyebrows and didn't look at her. So, can you not implicate my master in what happened in the past? Give me the redstone fruit. You can hit or scold me for what happened in the past, but I won't say a word. Because he looked away at the end of his words, he didn't see the shattering in her eyes when he said the last sentence. Chapter 284. Ethereal fell silent for a moment, waiting for her response. But all he heard was stifled breathing. He couldn't help but turn to look at her again. His eyes met with a pair of sorrowful eyes. He was stunned and didn't know what to say. He seemed to have returned to that day when he was about to leave. Xiaoyan had looked at him with the same eyes. He still couldn't forget it even when he woke up from a dream in the middle of the night. Why do you think I'm reluctant to give you the redstone fruit? She asked, enunciating each word. Back then, you found the peerless herb with great difficulty. A disciple of your sect was injured and needed the herb. But you, Ethereal, hadn't recovered from his shock, but he had already spoken. When he realized what he had said, Ethereal abruptly shut his mouth. So that was what he was talking about. Cheng Yin Luo couldn't help but laugh. Are you trying to say that I didn't want to give the herb to that disciple of mine back then because he had a grudge with me? Ethereal looked at her and didn't reply. She already knew the answer. Cheng Yin Luo shook her head. She didn't have the energy to explain. If that disciple of hers hadn't drugged his food and made him unconscious, she wouldn't have had to climb the cliff to pick the peerless herb on a stormy night. Later, that disciple of hers found out that she had the herb and pretended to be injured to ask for it from her. After she saw through him, he made up a rumor that she used her status as master's daughter to harm fellow disciples and bully new disciples. Sometimes, she really wanted to smash his brain open with something to see what was going on inside. Why did he always believe in others and not her character? Forget it, forget it, forget it. Kongling sensed that she was in low spirits and wanted to go up to her. However, she glanced at him indifferently, without any emotion. Just like that, she brushed past his shoulder and walked behind him. For a moment, he seemed to feel that the gust of wind that brushed past him just now seemed to represent that the fate between the two of them had ended. He turned around and saw the young princess consort's figure. Xiaoyan walked in front of her and showed her the box in her hand. Little sister Qing Yin, you didn't disappoint. You finally found the redstone fruit. Is this the redstone fruit? Chu Qing Yin looked at the luminous pearl-sized fruit in the box and couldn't help but exclaim. Cheng Yin Luo put the box away and raised her eyebrows. It's the real deal, and I'm honest with you. But, she smiled slyly. It's easy to get this figure. Our medical center is a little tight on cash recently. Could His Highness Prince Ing help us? Hearing this request, Chu Qing Yin couldn't help but smile. No problem. The King of England's mansion will support all the expenses of your clinic for the next 10 years. Cheng Yin Luo was a little doubtful. Can you make decisions for the King of England? You're not the official princess consort yet, right? Chu Qingyin shrugged. But a person's life is always more important than money. You don't bring it with you when you're born, and you don't bring it with you when you die. You can't just stuff money into your coffin when you're old. In any case, the finances of the King of England's mansion are in my hands now. I have the final say in everything related to money. Cheng Yinluo felt that this little girl was becoming more and more to her taste. She raised her hand and smiled brightly. Deal. Chu Qingyin raised her hand and bumped it. It's a deal. Hua Ling, who was guarding the medical center, almost tripped and fell. My little ancestor, you're so easily promising the medical center's expenses for the next 10 years. Aren't you being too hasty? When Master wakes up and sees you squandering like this, he'll have a headache. After handing the box to Chu Qingyin, Cheng Yinluo didn't want to turn around and face the people behind her. She said to Chu Qingyin, I'll go check on your big ice cube's condition. After all, the snake's kiss poison was very potent. If something happened, the gains wouldn't make up for the losses. Cheng Yinluo walked away without looking back. Chu Qingyin held the box in her hands and looked at the shocked ethereal not far away. She sighed and couldn't help but walk up to him. She said with some disappointment, Ethereal, I always thought you were a sensible man. But when I saw you just now, I was really surprised. I feel that Sister Yinluo's temper is really too good. If it were me, I wouldn't be able to resist throwing this box at you. Earlier, she was taking care of the big ice cube in the room. When she passed by after knocking on the leaves, she found out that Yinluo was in a difficult situation looking for that box. She couldn't help but want to help her, but she didn't expect to see this scene here. Ethereal smiled sadly. Young princess consort, I was too anxious. That's why I misunderstood little Yin. No matter what, you've already hurt her. Find a chance to explain yourself. I feel that Sister Yinluo is a very good girl. If you like her, you don't have to hide anymore. Chu Qingyin shook her head and turned to leave. Then, she thought of something and said softly, It's not easy for a woman to support a medical hall. I heard from the young disciples that Divine Physician Luo has been introducing outstanding men to Sister Yinluo. He wanted to help her support her sect, but she rejected all of them. Think about it. Why would a woman in the prime of her life stubbornly stay in a place and refuse to accept other men? You failed to live up to her expectations when you realize it too late. She didn't see Ethereal's body stiffen for a moment. She left after saying that. Why did she suddenly have such a feeling? It was because she thought of a cousin of hers. Back then, she had waited for a man for 10 years. But that man thought that she was already married and had children in another city. It wasn't until later that the two met and the truth was revealed. The man cried bitterly while her cousin turned and left. In the end, she floated across the sea and left that sad place. She would never forget her cousin's eyes that were red from crying. They were filled with despair and sorrow. 10 years of waiting had turned into a heart-wrenching pain. Hence, she didn't want to see the tragedy repeat itself. Chu Qingyin carried the box back to her room. She saw Cheng Yinluo standing by the window in a daze. She thought that no matter how strong a woman was, she would still be weak and helpless in the face of love. Cheng Yinluo heard a noise and turned to look at the door. Little sister Qingyin, you're back. Before she could finish speaking, she saw another figure enter. What are you doing here? She asked coldly. Ethereal looked at her, his eyes filled with self-reproach. Little Yin, I shouldn't have misunderstood you. I apologize. Chu Qingyin smiled faintly when she heard this. It seemed like her words had been effective. I don't need an apology from an irrelevant person. Cheng Yinluo crossed her arms and looked at him disdainfully. Ethereal knew that she was still angry and wouldn't forgive him for the time being. He smiled helplessly and turned to look at Chu Qingyin. Young princess consort, now that we have the redstone fruit, we're still missing the ice crystal flower and the love grass. This subordinate has heard of the ice crystal flower's whereabouts. Chu Qingyin's eyes lit up. Where is it? Although she was extremely unhappy, Cheng Yinluo was still attracted by his words. Chapter 285. With one hand behind his back, Ethereal recalled the rumors he had heard before and slowly explained. One year, I traveled to the Jiang Kingdom and heard that the Emperor of the Jiang Kingdom liked to collect rare flowers and herbs. 10 years ago, a minister presented a strange flower to the Emperor on his birthday. This flower was stored in ice. At that time, everyone who saw this flower was very surprised because this flower had no leaves but could bloom on its white branches. It became a legend among the people for a while. However, this flower never appeared again, so everyone forgot about it. The description of this flower by the people present is enough to determine that this flower is the rare ice crystal flower. Is this ice crystal flower still with the Jiang Kingdom's imperial family? 10 years had passed, and Chu Qingyan was not sure whether this flower still existed. Although she was excited, her mind was still very clear. If the news is accurate, it should still be there, because the Emperor of the Jiang Kingdom is obsessed with flowers. If there is no serious illness that is difficult to cure, he will not use this flower easily. I heard that there was once a concubine who took the opportunity to ask for this flower, but she was banished to the cold palace by the Emperor of the Jiang Kingdom. Her crime was that she coveted something that she should not covet and was insatiably greedy. This involved his master, so he was especially cautious when gathering information. Chu Qingyan's brows relaxed. Knowing the whereabouts of the ice crystal flower is a step forward. Ethereal nodded. Although I don't know how to get the ice crystal flower, I will think of a way. I think it will be very difficult. Cheng Yinluo shook her head. Since the Emperor of the Jiang Kingdom is obsessed with flowers, how can he give the flower to you? Unless the exchange conditions you offer can satisfy him. But he is already the Emperor of a kingdom. What else does he not have? So don't be too naive. Ethereal knew that Xiaoyan's words were directed at him, but he still fell into deep thought because of these words. Chu Qingyan felt that Yinluo's words were very reasonable. This was the dilemma they were facing. I think I should discuss this matter with Turin and the others. Cheng Yinluo shrugged. She had no objection. After all, Xiao Su was not her highness. Sister Yinluo, why don't you join us? Chu Qingyan asked her to stay. Cheng Yinluo thought for a moment. Although she was unwilling to stay in the same room with that person, if she left just like that, it would seem like she was running away. Therefore, she did not have any objections and stayed. Thus, Chu Qingyan called for an emergency meeting. Everyone was present. Chu Qingyan briefly explained the matter, and then asked for everyone's opinion. Turin pondered for a moment and said, Junlan State is between Jiang State and Sichuan State, which is deep in the basin and surrounded by mountains. It is basically isolated from the outside world. Therefore, our intelligence group is not very familiar with it. Besides, Sichuan doesn't have a deep friendship with it. If we want to ask for this ice crystal flower in the name of the royal family of Sichuan, the success is very small. Why are you thinking so much? If the other party doesn't agree, we can directly sneak into Jiang State's imperial palace and get the ice crystal flower. Let's solve this urgent problem first. Hualing felt that this matter could not be delayed any longer and couldn't help but interject. Turin shook his head. Don't think too simply. Jiang State's imperial palace is notoriously difficult to break into. There are strange techniques in every corner. I'm afraid that once we enter, we won't be able to return. Then what should we do? We can't just sit here and wait, right? Master still needs medicine to detoxify the poison. Hualing scratched his head, somewhat disheartened. Turin's gaze fell on the person in front of him, who had been silent all this time. Then, young princess consort, do you have any ideas? Chu Qingyan replied, I have an idea. Let's go to Jiang State first and see if we can find a chance to get the ice crystal flower. Now that we don't understand Jiang State's situation, everything is just empty talk. Why don't we go there first and then make plans? Turin and the others felt that the young princess consort's words made sense, but Mu Ling was a little worried. Young princess consort, Jiang State is a long journey. Even if we gallop at full speed, it will take at least a month. Can Master's poison last until then? Mu Ling's question was also what she was worried about. This was also the reason why she had asked Yinluo to stay behind for the meeting. She turned to look at the person who had been staying out of the matter. Older sister Yinluo, how long can you control His Highness poison? Cheng Yinluo snapped back to her senses after being called out. She saw that everyone was looking at her in unison and felt a little pressured. She coughed lightly. Originally, with the suppression of my medicinal herbs, I could only control the poison for 7 days. Now that I've found the redstone fruit, it's different. The redstone fruit can be used as medicine first. I should be able to control the poison for 81 days, which is close to 3 months. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. At least they still had time to fight for it. Chu Qingyin raised her eyebrows. Then her expression turned serious. She said to Turin, Ling, and the others, these 3 months are very precious. Deducting the time spent on the journey to Jiang State and the time spent on obtaining the ice crystal flower, less than 3 months isn't enough for us to make a round trip. So while we're looking for the ice crystal flower, we must also find a way to find the whereabouts of the love grass. Otherwise, if we're missing one person, His Highness poison won't be cured. This subordinate understands. Later, I'll send a messenger pigeon to Water Spirit and have her mobilize all the pigeons to find the whereabouts of the love grass. Turin immediately accepted the order. Ling and the others also nodded to express their understanding. Good. Ling, go and prepare for the departure. Ling, send someone to bring Xining and LVE to the medical hall. Ethereal, observe His Highness' condition at all times and prepare the medicinal herbs needed for the journey. Chu Qingyin methodically instructed. Everyone nodded and accepted the order, then went to carry out their tasks. When everyone in the room left, Chu Qingyin turned around and saw Yin Luo looking at her with a smile that wasn't a smile. She mistakenly thought that there was something on her face. Sister Yin Luo, is there something on my face? There's no flower, but I think I was seeing things before. Chung Yin Luo retracted her gaze and smiled teasingly. Oh, why do you say that? Chu Qingyin walked in front of her and asked curiously. The first time we met, I thought you were a little girl who didn't know much about the world. The second time we met, I still thought so. Now, I'm afraid I have to overturn this idea. Chung Yin Luo smiled lightly. So you're not a little sheep, but a little fox. You actually hid so deeply. I was almost fooled by your appearance. No, it should be said that when you tricked me into agreeing to cure the poison, I should have realized it. Sure enough, I'm still too naive. Chung Yin Luo's tone was somewhat regretful. The corners of Chu Qingyin's eyes twitched. She was still called naive? If that was the case, then everyone else was dregs, all right? Sister Yin Luo, this is called hiding so deeply. However, she was still a little happy to hear Chung Yin Luo's praise. Chung Yin Luo smiled. You really opened a dye house just to show me some color? Chu Qingyin giggled, then asked, That's right. How are we going to feed His Highness the redstone fruit? As soon as she finished speaking, she saw Chung Yin Luo reveal a malicious expression. Chu Qingyin suddenly had a bad premonition. The redstone fruit isn't for eating, but... Chapter 286. What is it? Chung Yin Luo's faint smile made Chu Qingyin shudder. Why did she look like an old witch who was trying to coax a little girl into eating a poisoned apple? Chung Yin Luo naturally did not know what Chu Qingyin was thinking, but she could guess a thing or two from the look on her face. Chung Yin Luo chuckled. It has other uses. She couldn't tell the little girl that it was only fun to tease her. Chu Qingyin could only express her helplessness at Chung Yin Luo's riddle. She thought that if she fought with Ethereal, even Ethereal wouldn't be her match. She was too cunning. Chung Yin Luo tapped her chin. She wondered if the little girl would have a nosebleed when she found out about the use of the redstone fruit. She was looking forward to it. However, no matter how the redstone fruit was used, it was fine as long as it could prolong the effects of the snake-kiss venom. However, she had a favor to ask of Chung Yin Luo. Sister Yin Luo, Qingyin has a favor to ask, but I don't know if you'll agree. Chu Qingyin was hesitant, but she still asked earnestly. Hearing this, Chung Yin Luo smiled knowingly. Do you want me to go with you to the Jiang Kingdom? Chu Qingyin's eyes lit up slightly as she said without hiding anything, Yes, it will take a long time for us to reach the Jiang Kingdom. We will not be able to make it back in time. I hope that you can come with us to the Jiang Kingdom. If anything happens along the way, my Highness will have an additional layer of protection. I won't force you, but I sincerely hope that Sister Yin Luo can be a good person to the end. Qing Yin will be grateful to you for the rest of her life. I'll tell you how to detoxify the poison. If you've gathered all the herbs, just follow the instructions. It doesn't matter if I go or not. Chung Yinluo leaned against the door and smiled. No, it's very important. No one knows if the snake's venom will mutate. As for His Highness's safety, I want to do my best to ensure it. Furthermore, I believe in you. If you can come with me, I will be more at ease. Chu Qingyin winked at her. Don't you have a doctor? His medical skills are not inferior to mine, Chung Yinluo said without hesitation. Chu Qingyin knew that she was talking about ethereal. She rolled her eyes and said, How can ethereal's medical skills be compared to yours? You were the one who detoxified the snake's kiss poison. You don't have to flatter me. I know what he's capable of. Chung Yinluo's face turned cold at the thought of that person. Good sister, just agree. Chu Qingyin hugged her arm and said coquettishly. Chung Yinluo patted her head gently. Just when Chu Qingyin thought that she had succeeded, Chung Yinluo poured a bucket of cold water on her. Little girl, your coquettish and cute tricks only work on His Highness. I won't fall for it. As soon as she finished speaking, she left. Chu Qingyin stood in the distance and rubbed her nose. Sigh. Ethereal, I've tried my best to fight for you. Unfortunately, Yinluo won't budge. You're on your own now. She turned around and returned to Xiao Su's side. She habitually held his hand and continued her usual nagging. Although she knew that he had no intention of giving up, she still wanted to talk to him. She felt that if she talked to him more, he might be able to wake up sooner instead of sleeping day after day. Big Ice Cube, I found the redstone fruit, but I'm still missing the ice crystal flower and the love leaf. I don't know where the love leaf is, but I've found the ice crystal flower. It's in the Jiang Kingdom. Although the Jiang Kingdom is far away, and I don't know what their situation is like, I won't give up as long as there's a glimmer of hope. There's one more thing. There are so many wolves and tigers in the Imperial Court who want you to die on this trip. In order to prevent any mishaps and bring about a fatal disaster, I acted on my own initiative and concealed our whereabouts. Everything will be decided after you wake up. Chu Qingyin rambled on and recalled what had happened recently. She told him everything in detail. She had heard people say that people who fell into a coma were actually very lonely. If someone could talk to them, they would feel at ease and it would also help their condition. That was why she persevered. Another reason was that ever since she met Xiao Su, she had never talked to him for such a long time. Although she was usually the one who chattered nonstop, Xiao Su would occasionally reply to her. She began to miss the past. She couldn't help but lie on the bedside and whisper, Big Ice Cube, when will you wake up? I miss you so much. Her voice was affectionate and filled with endless yearning. His motionless eyelashes fluttered inadvertently, like a butterfly that had been standing still for a long time, suddenly flapping its wings. But everything happened so quickly that it seemed to be an illusion. In the afternoon, a youth named 11 walked over and said politely, Miss Chu, my senior sister is looking for you. Chu Qingyin thought that he must be looking for her to explain the medicinal properties of the redstone fruit. She felt uneasy for a moment. She didn't think much of it and left the room with 11. 11, I see that you're older than little 10. What's your order? She couldn't help but be curious when she saw a 17 or 18-year-old disciple being addressed as 14 this morning. We're arranged according to the time of our apprenticeship. If someone in their 40s or 50s wants to be apprenticed in the future, they'll have to call me Senior Brother 11, 11 said with a smile. Chu Qingyin shuddered when she imagined a white-haired elder calling a wimpy kid Senior Brother. That image was too beautiful for her to bear. At this point, Chu Qingyin had already walked to Chung Yinluo's room. She knocked on the door and entered only after she heard a response. Sister Yinluo, I'm here. Take this. As soon as she entered the room, someone stuffed a piece of paper into her hands. Chu Qingyin glanced at Chung Yinluo, who was writing something. She wanted to ask about it, but seeing how busy she was, she could only lower her head to read what was written on the paper. The medicinal properties of the redstone fruit? After reading 10 lines at a glance, Chu Qingyin understood that the redstone fruit was indeed not to be eaten, but to be used in a medicinal bath. However, she felt that this method of treatment was very normal. She had often seen this method on television, so she really couldn't understand why Cheng Yinluo had looked so cunning before. Are you done reading? Cheng Yinluo finished the last stroke and looked at her with interest. Chu Qingyin nodded honestly. She saw that cunning smile again. Then you can go down and prepare for your highness's medicinal bath. Cheng Yinluo looked at her with a smile. Me? Aren't you the ones preparing it? Chu Qingyin raised her hand and pointed at herself in disbelief. That's right, it's you, Cheng Yinluo said matter-of-factly. Her eyes curved into crescents. I've done my research in private. Your Highness doesn't like to be touched by others, but he's an exception. I don't want our young disciple to die young. So as a family member of the injured, you have to do it yourself. What? Chu Qingyin was stunned. Chapter 287. She must have opened the door in the wrong way for her to hear this news. Chu Qingyin wondered if she should go out and come in again. That way, it would be more normal. Unfortunately, before she could act, Cheng Yinluo ruthlessly shattered her fantasy. Her tone was a little ambiguous. You don't have to be embarrassed. You're just learning to take care of your husband in advance. Anyway, when you're of marriageable age, you're going to marry him, right? Don't worry. I'm just giving you a good opportunity to take advantage of him. It's a waste not to take advantage of it. You have to grasp it well. I have high hopes for you. Chu Qingyin felt as if she had been struck by lightning. Why did these words sound so wrong? It sounded like she was a love-struck fool who couldn't wait to take advantage of a good man's innocence. All right, then I'll leave the important task of taking 3 medicinal baths a day to you. Cheng Yinluo crossed her arms and continued to smile as she made the final decision. When Chu Qingyin left with the prescription in her hand in grief and indignation, Cheng Yinluo's lips curled into a meaningful smile. She really wanted to see how the cold lord interacted with this cute little girl. She hoped that day would come soon. At this moment, Chu Qingyin didn't know what Cheng Yinluo was thinking. She looked at the prescription in her hand with a conflicted expression. She had never bathed the opposite sex in all her life. Needless to say, her little brother had never bathed before, let alone 3 medicinal baths a day. She wanted to cry, but had no tears. She was still a virgin, okay? Why did she always have to face these inexplicable problems? When she thought of Cheng Yinluo's teasing just now, she couldn't help but blush. Take care of her husband in advance? She had to marry him when she was of marriageable age. She didn't think so much, okay? The affairs of the world were unpredictable. She just wanted to spend her youth peacefully. But the more she thought about it, the hotter her face became. Chu Qingyin reached out and patted her face. No, she had to find someone to help her. So, she went to the wood spirit first. She always felt that the wood spirit was easier to talk to. So the situation went like this. The wood spirit was sharpening a knife. When it saw the young princess, it immediately stood up and bowed. Oh, the wood spirit. Young princess, this subordinate is here. Well, if His Highness wants to delay the onset of the poison, he will need a medicinal bath with the redstone fruit. Can you help His Highness with a medicinal bath? The moment Chu Qingyin's voice fell, Mu Ling looked at her with a fearful expression. Little princess consort, you don't know this, but Master has a habit. He doesn't like other people touching him. Several years ago, when Master was injured and fell into a deep sleep, Hu Ling accidentally touched Master's arm and had my hand broken by the unconscious Master. It took me 3 months to recover. This subordinate's hand still has to make small toys for you. So please spare me. Thus, the wood spirit picked up the knife on the ground and ran away. Chu Qingyin wanted to stop him, but it was already too late with his wind-like speed. Although Chu Qingyin had hit a wall with the wood spirit, she wasn't discouraged. She aimed at the second target, the fire spirit. When she explained why she came, Hu Ling did not even greet her before jumping onto a tree. Then he used his qing gong to fly away. His pitiful wails came from the distance. Young princess consort, please spare this subordinate's hand. This subordinate still has to use the knife to protect Master. Chu Qingyin watched the disappearing figure, and her lips curled. She wasn't afraid. She could find ethereal. When she found ethereal, Chu Qingyin was slightly stunned. It looked up at a 45-degree angle with a depressed expression. Was this still the romantic and carefree ethereal that she knew? Before Chu Qingyan could speak, Ethereal's desolate voice sounded. Young princess consort, this subordinate knows why you came, but this subordinate's mood is very confused and sad right now. I'm afraid I'm not up to the task, so I ask young princess consort to find someone else. With such an absent-minded appearance, she didn't feel assured leaving Big Ice Cube to him. After hesitating for a while, she only had Turin left to ask for help. She found Turin in the yard, who was arranging people. When Chu Qingyan was thinking about what to say, Turin saw her and spoke first. Young princess consort, I heard that you'll be helping Lord take a medicinal bath. Normally, us subordinates can't even get close to master. Fortunately, you're an exception and he won't reject your approach. I'll have to trouble you. After he finished speaking, Turin gave a slight nod and led his subordinates out the door, leaving Chu Qingyan to wither in the wind. Could she not avoid this calamity? At this time, the death warrant had already arrived. Big Sister Chu, the herbs for the medicinal bath have already been prepared. The wooden tub has also been placed in His Highness' room. You can start now. 11 walked over and smiled as he spoke to her. Chu Qingyan had always thought that this little disciple looked like a little angel when he smiled. Now, she had the illusion that he had sharp teeth in his mouth and evil wings on his back. I understand. Chu Qingyan lowered her head and replied. It was only when she walked into the room that she suddenly perked up. What was this? For the sake of Big Ice Cube's health, she should do it without hesitation. Moreover, she had already hugged and kissed Big Ice Cube. Was she afraid of being completely honest with him? Even though she was clearly thinking this, her heart still felt a little flustered. When she entered the room, the door behind her closed with a bang. She jumped in fright. She subconsciously wanted to open the door, but when she glanced at Big Ice Cube on the bed, her hand involuntarily dropped down. Big Ice Cube's life was at stake. How could she still have the mood to think about such trivial things? She had a mature mentality and avant-garde thinking. Was there a need to be so hesitant? When she asked herself this, her trembling heart slowly calmed down. She quickly walked in front of the bed and reached out her hand. Then she took it back and scratched her head. What should she do? She estimated the distance between the bed and the wooden tub. It was at least 5-6 steps away. She did not know the great Qian Kun shift, so how could she teleport him into the wooden tub? But Huo Ling and the others had already escaped. It was impossible for her to call for help, so she could only do it herself. She remembered that the prescription clearly stated that in order for the body to absorb the medicine, she had to take off her clothes. She subconsciously looked at Xiao Su's clothes and swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Cuckoo. She was going all out. She trembled as she reached out to touch his belt. The cold and hard belt was just like how he normally treated people. The moment she touched it, Chu Qingyan's fingers trembled slightly. As if he sensed someone approaching, Xiao Su's brows knit. At this time, in order to untie his tightly buckled belt, Chu Qingyan couldn't help leaning over. That familiar fragrance lingered in Xiao Su's nose. His knitted brows slowly relaxed and his tightly clenched fingers relaxed, as if he was relieved. Chu Qingyan did not know that she had just dodged the killing intent of the person below her. She was still struggling with his belt right now. She finally untied his belt with great difficulty. She let out a long sigh of relief before moving on to his outer clothes. Actually, the moment she took off his belt, his clothes had already fallen apart. She could see his exquisite collarbone and Chapter 288. The moment the neckline loosened, the exquisite collarbone entered her eyes, and she suddenly remembered what she had seen on Weibo. In order to prove that one's collarbone was prettier than others, there were coins, lighters, pen covers, and all kinds of other things placed on it. However, if she had coins on hand, she also wanted to try putting them on the Big Ice Cube. Just how much could he take? Not long after this thought appeared, she slapped it away. It's more important to do proper things. When she said this, she choked. When did taking off other people's clothes become proper things? No one would believe it even if she said it. A few black lines appeared on her forehead. And probably not many people would know about this matter. Low-key, low-key. She comforted herself as she hung the things in her hands on a shelf on the side. The Big Ice Cube's illness was more important, Otherwise, the medicine would turn cold, so she had to move quickly. At this time, in the courtyard outside the room, Hua Ling and Mu Ling were squatting sneakily. Turin was leaning against a tree, and Ethereal was standing with his arms crossed. The little princess consort should be starting, right? Hua Ling's voice was filled with interest. Looking at the time, it's about time, Mu Ling said after counting with her fingers. When the two of them were happily watching, Turin suddenly spoke from the side. You're not doing proper things and you're slacking off here? Moreover, the doors and windows were tightly shut, so they couldn't see anything. Hua Ling looked at him and said with a sneer, Didn't you also come to peep with us? Don't be the pot calling the kettle black. Turin choked and didn't say anything else. At this time, Ethereal shook his head and sighed. In the past, it was hard for us to even take a single step closer to Master, but now he's treating the little princess consort differently. I feel like our friendship over the past 10 years can't compare to this 1 year of being together. The wood, fire, and earth spirits deeply agreed. Ever since he had the little princess consort, they no longer existed in Master's eyes. If Chu Qingyan knew what they were thinking, she would definitely reply like this. She would say that without her, they wouldn't exist in the big ice cube's eyes. The wood, earth, fire, and space spirits felt like their knees had been pierced by an arrow. At this time, a head came over. How is it? How is it? What step are you at? Hua Ling casually replied, He's probably changing his clothes. No way. I clearly told the little girl not to wear clothes. As soon as he finished speaking, the four of them turned to look at the person who had suddenly appeared. Ethereal could not help but ask, Since when do we need to take off all our clothes in the medicinal bath? Chung Yanluo could not be bothered to look at him. My rules. The three spirits of wood, fire, and earth suddenly felt that their little princess had been cheated so miserably. No, it was their master, Chu Qingyan, who was in the room, naturally did not know what was happening outside. At this time, she helped Xiao Su to lean against the bed wall and took off the heavy coat. After taking off her outerwear, she was only left with her underwear. His pure white underwear contrasted with his pale cheeks, making him look even weaker. Her heart ached for him. She had always been strong enough to make her feel at ease, but now she had become so fragile. She closed her eyes and raised her hand to wipe away the tears at the corner of her eyes. Because of his sitting posture, his head was slightly tilted, and his expression was very innocent. Chu Qingyan was a little hesitant to take off his underwear. In the end, she gritted her teeth, and in a spurt of energy, she closed her eyes and opened the underwear. Because of his arm, she gently lifted his left hand. After safely passing through, she lifted his right hand. Finally, she took off his shirt. She was about to put down his right arm, but because of gravity, he slid down the bed wall. Chu Qingyan felt his movements and did not care about anything else. She immediately reached out to stop him, and Xiao Su's entire body fell into her chest. Because his head was made of bones, Chu Qingyan felt her chest being heavily hit. She almost cried out, but she bit her lip to stop herself. She had no choice but to open her eyes and reach out to hold his shoulder. The touch of warmth and coldness made her feel dazed. She gathered her thoughts and helped him sit up. She thought that the big ice cube usually looked lean, but she did not expect his body to be so muscular and sexy under his clothes. It was the most popular saying nowadays. He looked lean with clothes on, but muscular without clothes. Chu Qingyan swallowed her saliva. This was simply torture for her body and mind. Although she had never experienced love, her roommates in the dormitory kept talking about 8-pack abs, the golden ratio of the belly button, and the ratio of the upper body to the upper body was 5:8. At this moment, these were the words that were hovering in her mind. She swallowed her saliva again. She felt that the big ice cube fit all of these descriptions. If her unscrupulous roommates saw this scene, they would probably turn into wolves and pounce on him. Fortunately, she had good self-control. She patted her chest and looked away. Then, she retracted her gaze and looked straight ahead. Her mission was to help Big Ice Cube take a medicinal bath, not to admire beautiful men. After cheering him on, she was conflicted again. How should she take off the Big Ice Cube's pants? His upper body was fine, but she really did not have the courage to take off his lower body. However, Sister Yinluo had said that in order to maximize the medicinal bath's effect, she had to do this. Chu Qingyin stretched out her hands for a long time before slowly taking off his pants. Cough, cough. There was still a pair of underwear underneath. She would just ignore it for now. She had to put him in the wooden tub first. Chu Qingyin gestured with her hands. She lifted one of his arms and fixed it on her shoulder. Then she said, "Big Ice Cube, be careful. I'm going to help you up." She did not intend to hear his reply. He was already unconscious, so he probably did not know anything. Hence, she got ready to stand up. However, when she exerted her strength, she fell heavily on the bed. Fortunately, she bumped her head against his body. It was really painful. If I wasn't a 10-year-old, I wouldn't have a problem lifting the big ice cube up, right? She whimpered. Indeed, there was a huge difference in strength between a man and a woman. However, she did not dare to delay. Even if she went out to seek help, no one would care about her. She regained her composure. Gritting her teeth, she supported his waist with one hand and held his hand with the other. She used all her strength to help him up from the bed. However, she did not dare to think too much at this moment. After she steadied herself, she began to walk towards the wooden tub with difficulty. Every step was very strenuous. Not only did she have to bear all his weight, but she also had to overcome his slipping body at any moment. Although the big ice cube had been unconscious for the past few days, she had only given him a simple wipe. She had not bathed him. However, after so many days, there was no smell on him at all. He still smelled so good. Oh, he smelled so good. Smelled so good? Something was flowing out of her nose. Why was it so itchy? Chu Qingyin lowered her head. A drop of blood fell to the ground and shattered into a flower. Bastard. She was actually having a nosebleed? Why was she having a nosebleed? In an instant, she felt dizzy. Sigh. It must be because she had not rested well recently. That was why she was feeling so dizzy. This untimely nosebleed would cause misunderstandings, okay? She had been innocent all her life. Chapter 289. Her eyes seemed to be playing tricks on her. She shook her head. Her head felt heavy. She didn't know why, but she felt that her head was burning. Her head was heavy, and she really wanted to sleep. If she had a pillow, she would probably fall asleep. Could it be that she had this strange feeling because she saw Big Ice Cube's body? That couldn't be right. However, she couldn't care so much at this moment. The most important thing was to help Big Ice Cube inside. Because she had to support Xiao Su's entire body, she couldn't look down. She didn't see the water that the child had spilled on the ground when he brought it in. By the time she stepped on it, it was too late to realize that something was wrong. Because her foot had already slipped, she lost her balance and fell in Xiao Su's direction. She widened her eyes in fright. No, Big Ice Cube was injured, and the bones of people in winter were weaker than in other seasons. If he fell like this, it would be one disaster after another for Big Ice Cube, adding injuries on top of injuries. In the blink of an eye, she used all her strength to adjust their positions. Suddenly, she recalled the time when she had blocked the arrow for him to save Big Ice Cube, but he had leaned over her at the last moment. Tears welled up in her eyes. She didn't expect that the unfinished business back then would be fulfilled now. At that time, she wondered if Big Ice Cube would have a chance to avoid it if she hadn't jumped over. But in the end, Ethereal told herself that Big Ice Cube couldn't avoid it. At that time, Big Ice Cube couldn't split himself and didn't have any strength left. However, he suddenly exploded with power and pulled her down. It was enough to see that he treated her well and couldn't bear to see her get hurt. Back then, he said that he wouldn't let her get hurt again, and he really kept his promise. He was such a person who had a sense of responsibility. When she fell heavily on the ground, she didn't immediately feel any pain. She only felt that her heart was about to jump out of her body. What followed was a moment of dizziness, and Big Ice Cube's body fell directly on top of her. In order to avoid touching his wound in a hurry, she only dared to reach out and grab his arm. It was with this pull that Xiao Su's face coincidentally touched hers. Her hand froze in midair, and the scene of his face gradually enlarging seemed to be repeating endlessly in front of her eyes. His lips, this was too much of a coincidence. In an instant, he quivered. Chu Qingyin subconsciously turned her head, and his breath brushed past her cheek. As if she had been injected with chicken blood, she crawled up with a whoosh sound. Her face was so red that it could drip blood, but she didn't dare to look at him. She quickly propped him up. She didn't know where the strength came from, but in a daze, she propped him up and placed him into the wooden tub. When she saw him sitting quietly in the bucket, Chu Qingyin opened her palm. She still couldn't believe that she could do such an incredible thing. If it wasn't for today, she wouldn't have known that she had the potential to become Popeye. As expected, potential needed to be stimulated. However, that kiss just now, was it like a lucky kiss? Chu Qingyin shook her head. No, her mind was in a mess. What was she thinking? Suddenly, she began to feel dizzy again. Chu Qingyin couldn't help but lean on the wooden tub to wake herself up. She didn't know what was going on today, but her body kept protesting. Could it be that she was sick? Perhaps it was because she didn't have much rest recently. Chu Qingyin didn't think too much about it. She touched the few buckets of hot water on the ground. The water was still very hot. There shouldn't be any problems. Although Chu Qingyin felt that she had tossed around for a long time and wasted a lot of time. In fact, only a cup of tea's worth of time had passed. Because she was anxious and nervous, she felt that time was very long. Chu Qingyin didn't hesitate. She lifted the bucket and poured the water into the wooden tub. There were 3 or 4 buckets of hot water in the room. She poured one bucket after another, not daring to stop for fear that the water would turn cold. The herbs that she had poured at the bottom of the bucket immediately floated up with the water. When it almost reached Xiao Su's chest, she stopped. Because there was an arrow wound on Big Ice Cube's chest that hadn't formed a scab yet and couldn't come into contact with water. Chu Qingyin carefully avoided the gauze. But at this time, Chu Qingyin saw the black hair that poured over Xiao Su's shoulders. She suddenly patted her head and remembered that she had neglected it. She immediately turned her head to look for a hairpin to tie up his hair. But after looking for a long time, she couldn't find it. Finally, her eyes lit up and she pulled out the jade hairpin on her head. Immediately, 3,000 strands of black hair fell down, and the handsome little boy immediately returned to his elegant young girl appearance. But she didn't care about her hair. She walked behind Xiao Su and pushed his black hair to the back of his head. A man's hair wasn't as smooth as a woman's and was a little hard, but it still felt good to the touch. In the past, when they slept together, she had pulled out his hair to play with it. This was the first time she had done it for him. Although she hadn't done anyone else's hair before, she had done her best this time. She took a step back and admired it. Although it was a little crooked and strange, she couldn't resist Big Ice Cube's good temperament. No matter how bad the hairstyle was, it still looked beautiful on his head. After admiring it, Chu Qingyin couldn't help but praise her skills. She put on a serious face and didn't lie at all. After his hair was pulled up, his strong shoulders were exposed. Chu Qingyin raised her hand and poked his face with jealousy. She said softly, "Your skin is so good. As a woman, I'm not convinced." But no matter how she tossed and turned, the person sitting peacefully in the water didn't react at all. Chu Qingyin withdrew her hand. She remembered Yin Luo's words. After a quarter of an hour in the water, the redstone fruit could be cut open and the fruit inside could be pulled into the water. She immediately turned around to look for a dagger and took the redstone fruit from the tray. When she turned around, a hazy smoke rose. It seemed like she was admiring it through the thin smoke and faint fog. No. She had already sprayed it once. She coughed softly. This really wasn't a very good experience, Fortunately, no one noticed, but when she walked back to the wooden tub, she suddenly remembered that Big Ice Cube's underwear hadn't been taken off yet. It seemed that soaking in the water didn't affect the absorption of the herbs. But at that time, Yin Luo had repeatedly reminded her not to forget this part. She scratched her head. Should she take it off? But why did she feel that Yin Luo's expression at that time was a little, wretched? No. She must have seen wrongly. Yin Luo was a straightforward person. She wouldn't lie to her about this kind of thing. Forget it. She would rather kill 3,000 innocents than let one go. Chu Qingyin put down the dagger and redstone fruit in her hand and rolled up her sleeves to prevent them from getting wet. At this time, the herbs were floating on the water. There were flowers and leaves. In short, they were densely packed and covered the bottom of the water. But she could still vaguely see the white underwear underneath. Chapter 290. Before her hand was about to enter the water, she looked at the person in front of her worriedly. Then she pretended to be relaxed as she said, "Big ice cube, everything is according to authority. Cough, cough, I believe that you won't mind. Also, I guarantee that my eyes will be closed the entire time. I won't see anything that I shouldn't see. Cough, cough, so I'm going to start." Chu Qingyin tried to sound him out. Seeing that the person in the water didn't react at all, she let out a sigh of relief. Then she pulled up the sleeve that had slipped down her arm again and reached into the water. When she entered the water, she created a small splash. At first, the medicinal herbs scattered with the ripples, but soon they were attracted by her movements and gathered around her arm. She felt itchy on her arm, but she didn't dare to scratch it. In her hazy state, she felt his body shrink back. Chu Qingyin hesitantly raised her head to look at him, but his eyes were still tightly shut, so she continued. After finding the belt with great difficulty, Chu Qingyin was delighted. She found the knot and pulled it slightly. However, once she was happy, tragedy followed. She accidentally turned the slip knot into a dead knot. Then it was another fierce struggle. When she finally untied it, her forehead was already covered in sweat. She swallowed a mouthful of saliva and used the buoyancy of the water to complete the last step. This action seemed to be more tiring than holding 20 caddies of water and squatting for 4 hours in a horse stance. Until she held his pants in her hand. Chu Qingyin still couldn't believe that she had completed such a difficult action. Her potential was limitless, but she felt that it was better not to do this a second time. However, Chu Qingyin forgot that what was taken off had to be returned. Many years later, a certain man was lying on the couch, looking at the person beneath him. He smiled and replied, "This prince remembers that you were the one who took off my clothes during the medicinal bath. I should repay you for saving my life. Tell me, where should this prince start from?" "Don't worry, this prince is very democratic." Moreover, she forgot that what was taken off had to be put back on sooner or later. As she raised her arm, those herbs filled the hole again, densely covering the entire surface of the water. Chu Qingyin casually wiped the sweat off her face, then continued what she hadn't done. She carefully cut open the redstone fruit and realized that there were small, sparkling, and translucent grains inside. They were very small and cute. Admiring them was one thing, but Chu Qingyin quickly broke them into the water. Following that, the redstone fruit was added, and the water quickly turned red. Chu Qingyin's lips, the red color that spread out on the water, it made her think of tomato and egg drop soup. Cheng Yinluo had told her that she could change the water once the red color entered her body and gradually lightened. However, she couldn't guarantee how long it would take to absorb the red color, as it depended on the person's physique. Therefore, her current task was to keep an eye on Aqua Rose. Once the red color disappeared, it was time to change the water and add medicine. Chew to the water, to look to the point, to the water, to the water, to of the water. But of a person to the of the water, to the of the water. Even the mask couldn't hide his exquisite features. Chu Qingyin couldn't help but sigh softly. "Big ice cube," Sister Yinluo said that it's best to take off your mask when you're soaking in the medicine. "But I think it's okay if you don't take it off." She smiled slightly. "You're wearing a mask because you don't want anyone to see your face. So how can I take advantage of you when you're unconscious? Do you think that I'm becoming more sensible and loving? If you wake up, you have to help me teach Huoling and the others a lesson. When I need their help, they run away like a wisp of smoke." She complained. However, no matter what she said, the person opposite her didn't respond. Chu Qingyin frowned, but soon relaxed. Sister Yinluo said that after you've absorbed the redstone fruit, you'll slowly regain consciousness. "That's great." Just as she shifted into a more comfortable position and was about to continue chatting, She inadvertently noticed that the water in the wooden tub had slowly turned from a deep red to a light red. Now, it was approaching the same color as before. She had thought that the absorption process would take at least 2 hours, but it didn't even take half an hour. Chu Qingyin couldn't help but stand up. She had to inform 11 to bring in some hot water. As soon as she opened the door, Chu Qingyin clearly sensed that a few gazes had suddenly disappeared. She looked around suspiciously, but didn't find anything suspicious. She put aside her thoughts and turned to little 10 and 11, who were walking over quickly. The first medicinal bath is done. We can proceed with the second one. Okay. Although the two of them were surprised by the speed at which Xiao Su had absorbed the redstone fruit, they immediately retreated to prepare the hot water. It had to be said that the efficiency of the medical hall was very high. Before long, 3 buckets of hot water were brought in. That, little 10, 11, I'll have to trouble you, dash. Chu Qingyin had just finished speaking when the two of them put down the buckets and swiftly left, closing the door on their way out. Help me lift His Highness out of the tub. The last words were broken on her lips. Chu Qingyin's head was full of black lines. Was she that scary? Oh no. Was Her Highness that scary? Forget it. It was better to rely on herself than on others. Chu Qingyin walked to the side of the wooden tub, but she was somewhat helpless. She couldn't help but walk around the wooden tub. It wasn't easy to lift him up, and the water had to be changed. This problem was very difficult to solve. After thinking for a long time, she suddenly thought of a good idea. In ancient times, there was Sima Guang who smashed a vat to save his good friend. Now, there was Chu Qingyin who smashed a bucket to save the King of England. First, she closed her eyes and scooped up all the herbs floating on top of the wooden tub. After secretly opening one of her eyes to make sure that it was clean, she took out her dagger. This was a treasure that could cut iron as if it was mud, and this insignificant wooden tub was nothing to it. She gestured at the location and fiercely stabbed it, piercing through the wooden tub. The water immediately seeped out. Then, like peeling a fruit, she drew a circle and pulled it out. The chestnut-sized hole was completed. Soon, the water rushed out of the hole. In the blink of an eye, there was nothing left. Chu Qingyin cut a piece of cloth and wrapped it around the dug-out piece of wood. Then, she stuffed the cloth into the hole to make sure that it wouldn't fall out. Only then did she lift the bucket of hot water by her feet and pour it into the wooden tub. After filling the tub to the brim, she also scattered all the herbs in the basket into the water. Then, she broke a third of the redstone fruit into the tub. Yen Luo said that the absorption speed would be slower each time, so the second time did take a little longer than the first time. But in fact, it wasn't that long. She pulled out the wooden plug, continued to fill the tub, and continued to pour water. The 3 medicinal baths were finished in 4 hours. Chu Qingyin felt that she was about to cry from exhaustion, but she suddenly remembered something. The big ice cube was completely naked at this time. How was she going to move him back to the bed? Looking up at the unconscious person sitting quietly in the water, Chu Qingyin had the urge to bang her head against the wall for the first time. Chapter 291. Cough cough. Just as she was hesitating, the water had gradually turned cold. She couldn't delay any longer. Thus, she picked up a ribbon and covered her eyes. Then she held the hand of the person in the tub and used the buoyancy of the water to pull him up and move him out of the wooden tub. The moment Chu Qingyin covered her eyes, the person who had his eyes closed slowly opened his eyes. His gaze was filled with disbelief, emotion, pity, and love. He reached out to hold onto the wooden tub and move himself out of the wooden tub without a trace. Chu Qingyin felt that this move seemed to be much easier than the last time. Even if she was blindfolded, she seemed to be able to find the right position of the bed. After placing the person on the bed, Chu Qingyin didn't dare to take off the ribbon immediately. Instead, she picked up a set of clean clothes that was placed beside the bed and prepared to help Big Ice change into them. Xiao Su's gaze never left her. Watching her use all her strength to support him, watching her stupidly fumble around, and watching her clumsily help him put on his clothes, it would be a lie to say that he wasn't moved. She was blindfolded with the ribbon covering her pair of bright and clear eyes. The wide ribbon made her face look even more petite. The black hair scattered over her shoulders just happened to fall to her waist, shining with a faint luster. Wearing men's clothes made her figure look even more neat and slender. He felt that he hadn't looked at this little fellow properly for a long time. In this period of time, he found that she had grown taller but also thinner. His heart was filled with pity. At this time, she had already reached over to help him put on his clothes. He cooperated with her by lifting his hands and legs without her noticing. Chu Qingyin's eyes were blindfolded, and she couldn't see the beautiful man in front of her. She also couldn't see the beautiful man's performance at this time. She was still complacent that she had the talent to do things blindfolded. After putting on his underwear, she took off the ribbon. When her eyes saw the light of day again, Xiao Su had already closed his eyes again. Chu Qingyin quickly helped him put on the rest of his clothes and then covered him with a thick blanket. It was a success. She felt tired all her life. Lowering his head, he found that the big ice cube's face was no longer as pale as before, but it still made his heart ache. Big Ice Cube, the medicinal bath was very successful. We have nearly 3 months of time. Then we can set off for Jiang country. You have to wake up quickly. She leaned against his ear and whispered. After straightening up, Chu Qingyin did not stay idle anymore. Instead, she opened the door and said to the people outside, "The medicinal bath is over. You can come in and help us clean up." Walla 1, 2, 3, 7 heads popped out at once. Chu Qingyin's mouth twitched slightly. So these people were all hiding and watching. How cunning. I suddenly remembered that I have to prepare for the departure. I'll take my leave first. Turin touched his head, turned around as if nothing had happened, and ran away. I also have something to do. Turin coughed softly, then turned and left. I have to go and see if they're here yet. It's been so long. Why is there still no sign of them? Mu Ling muttered and ran away. There's definitely not enough medicinal herbs. I'll go and ask Xiao for more. Ethereal put his hand to his lips, then ran away in a hurry. Chu Qingyin turned to look at Cheng Yinluo, who was smiling sheepishly. She raised her hands and said innocently, "I have no intention of running away. I'm just going to see how your Highness medicinal bath is working." Cheng Yinluo slowly walked in. Chu Qingyin shrugged and stepped aside. Thus, "Oh my God," Chu Qingyin explained to me. "Is there a flood in this room?" Chu Qingyin pursed her lips and smiled, then slipped away. Chu Qingyin, stop right there. Whoever stopped was an idiot. Chu Qingyin was in a great mood. Don't think that she didn't know that she had schemed against this medicinal bath. This was called revenge for a gentleman. It was never too late to wait a few hours. Ha! Cheng Yinluo put her hands on her hips and looked helplessly at the disappearing figure. She could only resign herself to fate and call for someone to clean up. The cost of cleaning up will be deducted from your consultation fee. Chu Qingyin walked out of the medical hall and stopped in front of a forest. She turned her back to the tree trunk and touched her sleeve, then took out a bamboo flute. She stroked the flute with her fingers. After a while, she put it to her lips and blew into it. The mellow sound of the flute echoed in the forest. After a while, she heard the sound of clothes fluttering in the wind. She smiled slightly. "He's here." "Hello, little girl. Aren't you taking care of your Highness? Why are you still in the mood to summon me?" An elegant voice came from above. There was a hint of jealousy in it, but only the person in question could hear it. Chu Qingyin left the tree trunk and looked up at the person on the branch. She was curious. "Daunting. Why do you always appear in this way? It's not novel at all." Higashio Motetsu raised his eyebrows and jumped down. He complained, "Do you think this young master wants to do it? It's just so coincidental every time. It doesn't suit this young master's temperament at all." "You have temperament?" Chu Qingyin rolled her eyes. Higashio Motetsu felt embarrassed to be mocked by a little girl who was 6 years younger than him. But since she was 6 years younger than him, he was magnanimous and didn't bicker with her. "Seeing that you're still in the mood to joke with me, it proves that your Highness is out of danger." Higashio Motetsu leaned back with both hands and leaned against the tree trunk. His posture was indescribably carefree and leisurely, with a hint of devilish charm. Chu Qingyin stopped smiling, and her eyes turned serious. Strictly speaking, he should be out of danger for the time being. Oh. Higashio Motetsu looked at her in surprise. What do you mean? Could it be that there's still an unforeseen event? He thought that if Xiao Su didn't have many good days left to live, then he would take a sword and force him to the medical hall to hand over the thing. Just as he had this thought, he was interrupted by Chu Qingyin's words. Snake's kiss poison originally had no cure. Fortunately, we found a doctor and obtained the prescription. But to cure this poison, we need 3 rare herbs in this world. Now we're still missing 2. One of them is missing, and the other one is very difficult to obtain. I'm very worried. Chu Qingyin felt her head become heavy, and she couldn't help but lean against the tree trunk with a worried expression. So you called this young master out, because you want this young master to help you find the herbs? Higashio Motetsu's natural sense of superiority made him blurt out without thinking. Chu Qingyin shook her head. I wanted to say goodbye to you, because I'll be leaving here in a few days to look for herbs. Higashio Motetsu was slightly stunned that she didn't forget to say goodbye to him before leaving. He put away his playful expression. Then how did you know that I would be here? Chu Qingyin curved her lips, but didn't answer. Should he ask her why? She also couldn't explain it clearly. Perhaps she had some suspicions in her heart, but she also had some expectations. Seeing that she didn't answer, Higashio Motetsu changed the topic. What herbs are you missing? Love grass. I still don't know where it is. As she spoke, her voice became softer. Higashio Motetsu felt that something was wrong. He turned his head and saw that small figure slowly sliding down the tree trunk. Little girl. Chapter 292. When Chu Qingyin fell, Higashio Motetsu was very surprised. He hurriedly reached out to grab her arm, and the scalding heat made him slightly startled. Without any hesitation, he pulled her into his embrace. In an instant, it was as if he was holding a fireball in his arms. Higashio Motetsu immediately raised his hand to her forehead. It was very hot. She was having a fever. What was going on? Why did she suddenly have a high fever? He suddenly remembered that she had been running in the rain for so long and had to take care of Xiao Su. He suddenly understood. When Higashio Motetsu retracted his hand, he touched her sleeve. It was wet and cold. He was a little surprised. How did she get wet? He immediately shook the person in his arms and patted her face. Little girl, wake up. You can't fall asleep like this. At this time, the sun was already setting in the west. Winter nights always came earlier than other seasons. Once night came, the forest would be even colder. The little girl would definitely not be able to take it. However, no matter how he called out, the person in his arms did not respond. Zimo, come out for this young master. Higashio Motetsu roared. Xuanqi Zimo answered and appeared. Master, why are you looking for this subordinate? The little girl has a high fever. What should we do? Higashio Motetsu immediately asked. It's very simple. Let the fever go down first. Xuanqi Zimo looked at him as if his master was an idiot. Higashio Motetsu resisted the cross on his forehead. This young master also knows that the fever should go down first. But this young master is asking how to do it. Is your brain filled with paste? Xuanqi Zimo immediately looked at his master with a serious face. Just when Higashio Motetsu thought that he had some brilliant idea, he said with some difficulty, Master, this subordinate is not good at medicine, so I don't know. Higashio Motetsu gave him a cold look. If you don't know, then say so earlier. After saying that, Higashio Motetsu called out to her again. Unfortunately, there was no response at all. What should we do now? Why is it getting hotter? After being scolded, Xuanqi Zimo quickly came up with an idea. Master, although we don't know how to reduce the fever, there is someone who can. Didn't Miss Chu stay in the medical hall before? These words made Higashio Motetsu's eyes lit up. That's right. Xiao Su is also there. He was the one who took care of the little girl before. He has experience in taking care of children. Although he did not understand why, he did not to mention he was the only person who had experience. As long as he could, he had a hot potato, he would have a way to treat the little girl's treatment. Thinking Zimo Motetsu, and Zimo. When Zimo saw. At this time, The sky was already dark. It was winter, so the medical hall was closed for the day. Higashio Motetsu placed Zimo on the ground in front of the door. After hesitating for a moment, he took off his cloak and laid it on the ground. He then moved Zimo onto it, saying, "I must have owed you in my previous life. Otherwise, this young master would have been served by others my entire life. I've never served anyone so carefully and gently." The corner of Zimo's mouth twitched. His master was really a god who could lie through his teeth. How could his actions be considered gentle? If Miss Chu woke up now, she would probably give him a good beating. Higashio Motetsu picked up a stone and threw it at the wooden door. "Let's go." The two of them had just left when the door opened. Who is it? Who is so wicked as to throw a stone at the door? 11 opened the door and looked around. Seeing that there was no one around, he was about to close the door when he saw Chu Qingyin lying on the ground. "Big Sister Chu, wake up! Someone come!" Seeing that she did not wake up, 11 immediately shouted. Someone quickly came out and hurriedly carried Zimo inside. Xuanqi Zimo glanced at his master, who was standing in the corner. Actually, his master was also very concerned about Miss Chu. Seeing that they had been discovered, Higashio Motetsu smoothed out the creases on his sleeves, then said to the people beside him, "All right, let's go. Little girl, we'll meet again in the future." At this moment, Xiao was lying on the bed. His eyes, which had been tightly shut for the past few days, had finally opened. He was still a little shocked by everything that the little girl had done for him today. Why didn't he tell her that he was awake? It was probably because he was afraid that she would feel awkward and shy. In the book of parenting, it was written that children after the age of 10 were more emotional, shy, and independent. Thus, in order to prevent her from feeling uncomfortable, he had not woken up at that time. However, it was also because of this that he had the opportunity to see another side of her. Smart, sly, and steady. She had already grown a lot along the way. Even when he wasn't paying attention, he had not noticed when he was not paying attention. Moreover, since no one had noticed that he had woken up, he had the time to sort out the things that had happened recently. He still remembered the words that the little girl had said to him. "If you survive this crisis, then your life is mine. If I tell you to go west, then you're not allowed to go east. If I tell you to put down those so-called responsibilities, then you're not allowed to shoulder them. Otherwise, I won't be polite to you." If he could live a lifetime for himself, he would be willing. However, he did not know why the little girl had not returned. He did not know where she had run off to. At this moment, the door was pushed open. Xiao turned his head at the sound, but when he saw who it was, the faint light in his eyes disappeared. Chung Yinluo looked at the person on the bed and teased, "What's wrong? When you realized that I wasn't the person you wanted to see, you put on a cold face. Can't you see that I'm your savior? Be careful, or I'll make you come in on a stretcher and leave on a stretcher." "Nice to meet you, Miss Chung." Xiao ignored the sarcasm in her words. "You actually know me?" Chung Yinluo was a little surprised, but she soon found the reason. Perhaps the little girl had often nagged him when he was unconscious. Xiao did not deny it. Seeing him so gloomy, Chung Yinluo began to wonder how he got along with the little lass. She had come here to look for the little lass, but the little lass was not around. She turned around and wanted to leave. Moreover, this person was someone she disliked. She did not want to stay in the same room with him. "Miss Chung, if Ethereal had offended you in any way, I apologize on his behalf. If I had unintentionally offended Miss Chung, I'm very sorry." An indifferent voice sounded behind her. The apology in his voice was indeed hard to ignore. His words surprised Chung Yinluo. She turned to look at the person on the bed in disbelief. She had heard that the King of England was a man of his word. He was cold-blooded and heartless. Why would he apologize to someone? It was scarier than the sun rising in the west. Xiao didn't care about Chung Yinluo's mood at the moment. The thing that the little girl mentioned the most to him was about Kong Ling and her. So much so that he had blurted it out without thinking. It seemed that he had been influenced by the little girl. At this moment, there was a rush of footsteps. "Senior sister, Sister Chu has fainted." Chapter 293. Xiao Su immediately sat up when he heard that the little fellow had a high fever, despite his injuries. Cheng Yin Luo said to the outside, "Bring her to the West Wing ward. I'll go take a look." As soon as he said this, Xiao Su immediately objected. "Bring him into this room?" Cheng Yin Luo was about to retort when she saw Turin carrying Chu Qingyin quickly walking towards them. She frowned but didn't say anything. She immediately followed them into the room. Xiao Su had already stepped forward to take Chu Qingyin the moment Turin entered the room. He could feel her burning body the moment he touched her. His gaze was cold as he immediately carried her to the bed. He raised his hand to touch her little face. It was pale and bloodless. She was no longer as lively as before. His heart wrenched. "Your Highness, let me take the little girl's pulse first." Cheng Yin Luo immediately stepped forward. Hearing this, Xiao Su stepped back to give her some space. Cheng Yin Luo sat on the bed and took her pulse. Suddenly, she frowned. The cold has invaded her body for more than a day or two. It has accumulated to the point that she has a high fever. She should have felt dizzy before this, but the little girl didn't say anything. Cheng Yin Luo couldn't help but look at the person beside her. It seems that she didn't care about her own body in order to take care of you. Perhaps she didn't care at all. After you took the medicinal bath, she relaxed and fell ill. Xiao Su remained silent and didn't reply. His gaze was fixed on the person on the bed. Cheng Yin Luo turned to look at Chu Qingyin. "I'll prescribe some medicine for her first. Let's see if the fever will subside tonight. If it doesn't, what if it doesn't subside?" Xiao Su frowned and looked at her. Cheng Yin Luo sighed. At her age, if the fever isn't treated properly, it will affect her development in the future. For example, her intelligence. Cheng Yin Luo didn't say it clearly, but everyone present was Ling Long's people. How could they not know what she meant? If the fever didn't subside, then Chu Qingyin would most likely become a fool. Xiao Su closed his eyes. When he opened them again, his entire body was as cold as ice. "Go and boil the medicine first. Her fever must be brought down by tonight." Cheng Yin Luo didn't like it when others spoke to her in a commanding tone. However, she wasn't bothered by it at all. I'll get someone to arrange Qingyin's room first." Cheng Yin Luo stood up and said. "No need. She's with this prince," said Xiao Su without even thinking about it. When Cheng Yin Luo saw that there was nothing unusual in the room, she understood what was going on. She did not want to waste time on this issue. Instead, she said to Turin and the others before she left, "The patient needs fresh air now. You'd better leave first." Tu Ling and the others glanced at their master. After receiving his permission, they retreated. The door closed, and the room fell silent. Xiao Su sat down and raised his hand to brush the hair in front of the little fellow's forehead, revealing her full and smooth forehead. He gently stroked her hair. The scorching heat rubbed against his fingertips. He held her cold fingertips tenderly, trying to warm her up. "Little fellow, don't be afraid. This prince won't let you become a fool," he said softly. What he got in response was a painful moan. Xiao Su's brows were tightly knitted, and he couldn't calm them down. At this moment, Little 10 came in with a basin of water, and 11 came in with a bowl of medicine. Little 10 said, "Your Highness, my senior sister said that she'll rub a cloth and stick it on big sister Chu's forehead to help her reduce her fever." 11 continued, "This is the medicine my senior sister asked me to boil. She needs to drink it while it's hot. Put it down." Xiao Su raised his hand and ordered. Little 10 and 11 looked at each other. Was His Highness planning to take care of Big Sister Chu himself? An injured patient taking care of a sick patient? But the two of them obediently put down the things, told him what to pay attention to, and the two of them went out. Xiao Su got up and took the bowl of medicine. He lifted her up and hugged her to his chest. Then he put the bowl close to her lips, and then he lifted her chin with his finger. She cooperatively opened her mouth slightly and drank the medicine. This was the experience he had from taking care of the little fellow before, and now it was easy to use. If Chu Qingyin saw this scene, she would probably vomit blood in anger. Why was it so easy for her to feed the medicine? But he had to coax her? This wasn't fair at all. After feeding the medicine, Xiao Su wiped the corner of her mouth with a brocade cloth, and then put her down. When he got up again, a small hand somehow grabbed the corner of his clothes. He lowered his head and turned to look at her face, only to see that she was still unconscious, and this action was just subconscious. He bent down, intending to move her little hand away, but he heard a low, pleading voice. "Don't go, don't go." He couldn't help but look at her. He didn't know who she was telling not to go. After hesitating for a moment, he replied, "I'm not going. Don't be afraid." With that, he put her hand back into the quilt and then carried the water basin to the chair. He wrung out the cloth towel, folded it into a square, and stuck it on her forehead. Then he sat down again. Looking at this pale face, Xiao couldn't help but think of the previous times when she was poisoned and injured. It seemed that in his memory, she was either as fresh as the sun or as weak as a soft willow. But no matter if it was the past or the present, he hoped that she was happy and healthy. "Little fellow, why are you so stupid? Why did you come back? If you didn't come back, you wouldn't have encountered so many things." A person, in his childhood, encountered something, and it was destined that his memories of his youth would be filled with color. He didn't want the little fellow's childhood to be filled with fear and endless darkness. "Big Ice Cube, don't go. I don't want you to go. I want you to live." The low, moaning voice sounded again. This time he heard it very clearly, and his gaze was a little dazed. He didn't expect that in her dreams, she was still thinking about him. Her voice was filled with fear and worry, and it was like a chain that firmly locked his heart. "I'm not going. I won't go again." Xiao reached out to caress her face, his eyes full of love. Suddenly, Chu Qingyin reached out and grabbed his hand that was on her face tightly. "Big Ice Cube, don't leave. I beg you, they don't want you. I want you, I beg you. I just want you to wake up. Don't leave me." Chu Qingyin's face was suddenly filled with tears. Her voice was choked, as if she was about to lose the most important treasure in her life. The hand that was touching her cheek was stained with her hot tears. Xiao's heart felt like it had been hit hard, and there were still layers of ripples in his heart. "They don't want you, I want you. I beg you, don't leave. I just want you to wake up." Since he was young, what he saw the most was conspiracy, blood, and killing. He thought that his life would pass like this. He never thought that there would be such a person, crying and shouting as long as he was safe. Chapter 294. At that moment, Xiao felt as if his heart had cracked open. Instead of cold wind, it was warm light that poured in. He suddenly realized that he had found what he had been searching for nearly 20 years in her body. He had thought that he was too far away from warmth. However, she did not expect to see a warmth that she had never experienced before in this little fellow. "Little fellow, wake up quickly if you don't want me to leave." Xiao held her hand tightly, suppressing the bitterness and worry in his throat. If God had finally let him go after torturing him for so many years, he would not take her away, since she was already here. He would not allow her to leave. Chu Qingyin seemed to have sensed a familiar aura around her. Slowly, she stopped sobbing and fell into a coma again. Her fever had yet to subside. 2 hours later, Cheng Yinluo came in to check on her. She found that the fever had not subsided. Instead, it seemed to be increasing in temperature. She immediately changed the medicine and instructed Xiao to feed her. Xiao held her pale little hand and agreed. Before Cheng Yinluo left, she saw a hint of pain in Xiao's calm eyes. She could not help but sigh in her heart. He was also a man with a hard life. Forget it. She would write off all the resentment she had against him. After all, he was only an indirect factor back then. If she really wanted to blame someone, she could only blame fate and fate. She turned to leave, only to see a man looking at her in the moonlight. Cheng Yinluo pretended not to see him and was about to walk past him. "Xiaoyan, I'm sorry," Ethereal said, bowing his head. Cheng Yinluo closed her eyes. She had waited 6 years for this apology, but it was too late, because her heart was already tired. How could she let a heart riddled with holes wait for a relationship that had yet to blossom? She didn't stop walking, forcing herself not to look back. "Murong-ju, if I could choose, I would rather not have met you." The moment the cold wind blew, Ethereal clenched his hands. He wanted to stop her, But he knew clearly in his heart that Xiao Yan hated him. Xiao Yan's hatred for him had been engraved into her bones. No matter what he said, she would never forgive herself. However, if there was hatred, then it was fine. If there was no hatred, then it would be the most despairing. On a moonlit night, who would be happy and who would be sad? No one knows. Who would pity her if she were to be given the winter wind and the cold moon? After Xiao Su fed her the second bowl of medicine, Chu Qingyin's body temperature began to show signs of subsiding. However, he remembered Cheng Yinluo's instructions. She had used a strong medicine for this prescription, and she couldn't guarantee that it wouldn't relapse in the middle of the night. She had asked him to be careful. The sleeping person did not wake up. Time passed bit by bit, but it made people wait anxiously. He suddenly thought, when he was in a coma these days, was the little fellow also worried about him like this? He was a little regretful. He should have told her that he had woken up today so that she wouldn't have to suffer the pain of fear in her dream again. A touch of bitterness appeared in the corner of his mouth. Xiao Su held her hand and said slowly, I remember that during the period when I was in a coma, you talked to me a lot. This time, it's my turn to talk to you. He still remembered that when he was wandering in the dark, it was the little fellow who didn't give up. Every sentence she said constantly filled the scenery around him. Every time he was ready to leave, it was her cries, her reluctance, and her regret. Like vines, she wrapped his limbs tightly, making him unable to leave, and then waited for the dawn to come. My identity was destined the moment I was born. I was the legitimate prince of the Sichuan kingdom. It was also destined that I would live an unequal life. When I was young, I didn't understand. I thought that as long as I worked hard and became successful, they would look at me. Unfortunately, they didn't. Later, I thought that if I became an irreplaceable person, would they also look at me? But in the end, he smiled bitterly. I became a thorn in their side, a stumbling block that they wanted to get rid of. I didn't understand. Why didn't everything develop according to Imperial Mother's plan? Until that big fire ignited. In order to protect me, the people around me were killed one by one in front of me. Blood flowed like a river in the palace. The fire burned red. When I was 10 years old, my eyes were red. Red blood, red fire. And then everything was swallowed up. Little fellow, in the past, I used to envy the children of the common people. Although they didn't live a rich life and didn't have servants, they had family ties that I didn't have. Because of this, they could easily defeat me. He caressed her face and smiled faintly. Little fellow, have you already guessed the other mission that Imperial Father gave me? Was that why you weren't willing to leave me in the forest? He didn't wait for a reply from the person on the bed, but he wasn't disappointed. Instead, he continued, originally, I had planned to hand over the remaining military power after I was released from prison and take you away from the Imperial Court. But Imperial Father was one step ahead of me and proposed a mission. Although different paths lead to the same goal, what he wanted was also my military power and my departure. However, the departure he wanted was different from the departure I wanted. That night of kneeling, Imperial Father's injustice, and Imperial Mother's disappointment, he pondered for a long time. Suddenly, he understood many things. There was a smile at the corner of his mouth, but there wasn't a trace of sorrow. As a person in power, one must have a cold-blooded heart. Even towards one's own son, it was the same. The person he wanted to support wasn't me, so I wasn't surprised. Or rather, 10 years ago, I had already understood. But little fellow, there are many things in this world that you can't avoid even if you want to. I don't want to fight for power, but my mother and the Liang family need me to fight for them. My mother gave birth to me, and the Liang family raised my mother. I can't abandon them. But after so many years, I've only done enough for them to keep the Fu family in check. I can't afford to do more than that. I can't give more than that. Because I'm worried that if I give too much, a person's heart will swell, and it will be out of control. He closed his eyes. In other people's eyes, you are not the best. No matter how much you fight for it, it won't change. Since this is the case, why should I fight for it? Imperial Father only had fourth Imperial brother in his heart. Since this couldn't be changed, no matter how hard he tried, it would be useless. I know, You must be secretly saying that I shouldn't be so foolishly loyal. I shouldn't have agreed to these unequal treaties, and I shouldn't have taken on these missions. But little fellow, I'm first a citizen of the Sichuan, and then a prince. If the country needs me, I must contribute my ability to punish evil and get justice for the people, and return peace to the Sichuan. I've lived alone for so many years, and I don't want those children to repeat my mistakes. But now, I know that I still have you. I'm no longer alone. Chapter 295. After speaking intermittently, Xiao Su felt the depression in his chest slowly dissipate. He couldn't help curling his lips. The little fellow was right. Once there was something in his heart, he shouldn't keep suppressing it. Otherwise, every step he took would become heavier and heavier. One day he would be crushed. For so many years, he had never mentioned this to anyone. On one hand, he felt that it was unnecessary. Only the weak would talk about their suffering. On the other hand, he didn't have anyone to talk to. If the people around him didn't obey him, then they would scheme against him. Xiao Su once again raised his hand to stroke her long hair. It was soft but not greasy. The hard lines on his cheeks slowly softened, and his expression was calm. Little fellow, if you can wake up, this king will grant you a wish. Chu Qingyan aimlessly walked in the desert. This world was like a furnace. No matter where she went, there would be waves of heat. The sand under her feet seemed to want to drill into the soles of her feet. It was a heart-wrenching pain. There was no one around her, no trees, no water. There was only the scorching sun above her head that was constantly emitting its light. If this went on, she would be roasted to death. She suddenly remembered a Weibo joke she had seen before. Between me and roasted meat, there was only a pinch of cumin. Chu Qingyan wanted to cry, but no tears came out. Was this a dream? But why did it feel so real? Her body was so hot. The sand was so hot. She finally couldn't bear it anymore. Her lips were dry and cracked. Even if she was lying on the ground, her skin was burned and she couldn't move. Thirsty. Her mouth felt like it was stuffed with sand. It was painful and dry. Just as she was about to lose consciousness, a sweet spring water poured into her mouth. Was it raining? She was in a daze. Just as she was in a daze, she suddenly heard someone say something in her ear. It was near and far. It was magnetic and low like the sound of nature. The more she couldn't hear it, the more she wanted to know what he was saying. It wasn't until later that she heard the last sentence. Little fellow, if you can wake up, this king will grant you a wish. Wish? She suddenly opened her eyes. They stared at each other. Big Ice Cube, you're awake? You're awake? The two of them said in unison. Before she could react, she saw the person who had always pursed his lips into a thin line suddenly curl the corners of his lips. In the blink of an eye, thousands of pear trees bloomed, and resplendent stars bloomed in the sky. Big Ice Cube, are you smiling? She couldn't help but rub her eyes. Was this really not a dream? Hearing her words, Xiao Su stopped smiling, but his tone was very strict. You still have the mood to care about other things now? Ah! Chu Qingyan didn't understand why the atmosphere suddenly changed. You disobeyed my orders and came back without permission. You didn't take good care of yourself and fell sick instead. Huh? The lively appearance of the person in front of him made him finally put down the big stone in his heart, and he couldn't help but hold her hand tighter. Chu Qingyan's mind was still processing what was going on, but when she heard the two consecutive s and the threatening tone, her heart trembled. You what? Xiao Su raised his voice and looked at her with a smile that wasn't a smile. Her face turned red from his words. Xiao Su sighed softly. This kind of lively appearance was more suitable for her. Chu Qingyan felt that no matter what she said, it would be wrong. Her mind turned, and she immediately smiled. She reached out to grab his arm when he wasn't paying attention and said coquettishly, "Isn't this my first offense? There won't be a next time." You still want a next time? Xiao Su glanced at her. Hearing this, she immediately raised her hand. I promise. I'll listen to you from now on and won't disregard your orders. After saying this, she secretly added in her heart, unless there's a special situation. After saying this, she shook his arm and giggled. Is your highness satisfied like this? Although her tone was filled with joy, her voice was still hoarse from just waking up. He suppressed the reproach in his heart. In fact, he was also very clear in his heart that the little fellow had come back to save him. If she had not rushed over, perhaps everything would have been different. But he had to say something. He didn't want this kind of experience to happen again. If there's a next time, don't act on your own initiative. Be obedient and live well. Hearing this, she couldn't help but recall that night when Yin Luo said that his will to live was weak. She rubbed against his sleeve and said with a little sadness in her voice, Big Ice Cube, I want to ask you a question. Answer me honestly. The little fellow's sudden seriousness made him a little uncomfortable. The hand he raised in the air gently fell down. Ask away. Why didn't you have the motivation to live back then? She raised her head and looked into his eyes, as if she wanted to see into his heart. She asked with great care, word by word. She wanted to confirm one thing. Xiao Su's hand paused. He had already guessed that with the little fellow's temperament, she wouldn't let go of this question. It wasn't that she didn't have the motivation, but that she felt that it was meaningless. There's no reason. He lowered his eyes. His thick eyelashes covered all his pain. She knew that she couldn't get an answer from him, but she still didn't want to give up. Not only did she want to confirm one thing, she also wanted to prevent this kind of thing from happening. She was such a strong ice cube. She couldn't have such an unsolvable knot in her heart and a weak spot that couldn't withstand a single blow. Did the Sichuan Emperor force you? Chu Qingyan asked without hesitation. Qingyan? Don't talk nonsense. Xiao Su patted her head. Although his tone was very strict, his expression was very calm. Chu Qingyan pinched his fingers without any fear. Okay, I won't say it, but I know that I'm not talking nonsense. I heard the conversation between you and the cloaked man. It's just that I feel very sorry for you. How many bad things did you do in your previous life to have such a father in this life? Qingyan, didn't she say that she wouldn't say it? Why was she still nagging? Xiao Su felt that he was really helpless with this little fellow. Big Ice Cube, don't keep calling my name. I know it's very nice. Chu Qingyan pretended to pick her ears, then looked at him with a smile. Big Ice Cube, don't be sad. Your life was saved by me. It has nothing to do with the Sichuan imperial family. The things you did to Sichuan in the past are enough. Your identity ends here. Xiao Su raised his eyebrows. He didn't know what other shocking things this little fellow would say. When I awakened your will, I had already thought it through. Your life is mine, so I order you to not be responsible for anything. From today onwards, you have been reborn. You can properly repay the kindness of giving birth to you. But your current identity is not only the master of the Xiao Lai Mount, but also my Chu Qingyan's Big Ice Cube. If you have anything you want to do in the future, please consider it first before we make a decision. Furthermore, I won't allow you to give up on yourself and exile yourself. Chu Qingyan declared domineeringly. Chapter 296. Strictly speaking, her hoarse voice wasn't pleasant to the ears. However, Xiao Su couldn't help but tremble when those words came out of her petite body. If it were any other day, anyone who dared to speak to him in such a domineering tone would have been beheaded. However, he could hear her fear, her pretense to be strong, and her forced smile in those domineering words. She was still uneasy, afraid that she would leave him one day. Xiao Su smirked. However, the little fellow didn't know that when he decided to let go of his obsession, he was no longer the Xiao Su who lived for Sichuan. Life was long, and he suddenly wanted to live for himself. Xiao Su couldn't help but reach out and carry her into his arms. His movements were gentle as he replied softly, Okay. Chu Qingyan stared blankly as she rambled on. She was afraid that he would laugh at her for overestimating herself. However, the moment she finished speaking, she got a response from him. She was very emotional, but also very sad. She was emotional because she didn't expect him to agree. At most, he would just laugh it off, but he agreed. She was sad because after being emotional, what was left was her heartache for him. It must be very difficult to let go of her obsession for so many years. Big Ice Cube, from now on, I have you, and you have me. We won't be lonely anymore. Chu Qingyan reached out and hugged him back. There was no need for any more emotional words. She knew that the Big Ice Cube didn't need them. Letting go was actually fulfilling her wish. Xiao Su gently patted her back and replied mildly. Chu Qingyan's fever subsided, and the tense atmosphere in the courtyard dissipated. Cheng Yinluo went to the door to check her pulse. After confirming that she was fine, she said, "For the next few days, eat some plain porridge and pickled vegetables. Don't touch anything else." "I can't touch anything? Not even pastries and the like?" Xining, who had been brought back, was standing by the bed. She knew that her mistress liked these snacks the most. Suddenly returning to the days of pickled vegetables, she couldn't bear it. Cheng Yinluo raised a finger and pointed at the coughing dog. "Are you sure your master can eat anything other than plain porridge?" Chu Qingyan wanted to hold it in, but her throat was too itchy. The more she coughed, the worse it got. Xining could only spread her hands in front of her mistress. She had already tried her best. On the other hand, Xiao Su had already silently memorized all the things that should be taboo for the little guy. Chu Qingyan felt that the process of recuperation was very painful. However, the injuries on Xiao Su's body were still in critical condition. Therefore, one injured and the other sick began to recuperate. However, in less than 2 days, the wound on Xiao Su's chest was no longer a problem. The main problem was that Chu Qingyan was still coughing. "Big Ice Cube, when are we leaving?" Chu Qingyan was a little impatient. She knew that time waited for no man. Every day that passed was the hope of finding the ice crystal flower. "No hurry." He bent over the table and wrote something. She couldn't remember how many times she had asked and how many times he had answered. Xining covered her mouth and snickered. She was already used to this scene that happened every day, but she still found it very interesting. She didn't know what had happened during her absence, but she felt that the relationship between her mistress and His Highness seemed to be better than before. If Chu Qingyan knew what she was thinking, she would definitely ridicule her mistress. Which eye of hers saw that they were better than before? Not to mention that she had taken away her snacks. She could only watch others eat and drink delicious food, while she could only eat steamed buns, pickled vegetables, and tofu. In fact, except for the day when she had a high fever, she had continued to have a low fever for several days. It was only today that she got better. A few days ago, she had coughed so much that she almost coughed her lungs out. She had already forgotten when she had a bad cold, but this was the first time she had been hovering between life and death. Xiao Su finished writing the letter in his hand and folded it into an envelope. He called Turin in and handed it to him so that he could send it out. Chu Qingyan was a little curious about what he had written inside. When he sat down in front of her, she couldn't help but ask, "That letter, who did you write it to?" "An old friend." Xiao Su didn't hide it from her. "Old friend?" She originally wanted to ask him what was written inside, but she was attracted by the person. "Big Ice Cube, I didn't expect you to have a friend too?" Surprised? Xiao Su raised his eyebrows. Chu Qingyan then realized that she had said something that she shouldn't have said. She hurriedly laughed and said, No, I just want to know what kind of person can become friends with Big Ice Cube." "A butterfly." Xiao Su thought for a while and gave a pertinent answer. "Ah, a butterfly?" Chu Qingyan was a little incredulous. "A woman? No, a man." Xiao Su thought of that friend, and his head hurt a little. Passing through 10,000 flowers, not a single leaf touched him. It was tailor-made for him. Chu Qingyan unconsciously sighed in relief. Then she leaned against the bed and said with a smile, "Does he look like the second prince?" Thinking of his second royal brother, Xiao Su said indifferently, "Jackals of the same tribe." Chu Qingyan couldn't help but stick out her tongue. Big Ice Cube was really ruthless with his words, but she was still very curious about that butterfly. To be able to become Big Ice Cube's friend, he must have something special about him. Seeing that she was deep in thought, Xiao Su said, "You will see him when you reach Jiang country." Chu Qingyan nodded, thinking that she was probably going to ask for his help. "Does Big Ice Cube have any other old friends?" "There's another one in Jiangnan. If there's a chance, this prince will take you to see him." Another figure appeared in Xiao Su's mind. Thin as bamboo, handsome as a tree. They hadn't seen each other for many years. Is it a man? Chu Qingyin couldn't help but ask. Yes. Xiao Su didn't notice that she sighed in relief because of his answer. Seeing Xining bring a bowl of medicine, he took it. In fact, even she didn't understand why she had such worries. Before she could think about it, she saw the bitter medicine that night. She immediately shrank back into the quilt. I've already recovered. I don't want to drink it. She stuck out her little head and protested, then quickly shrank back. Are you sure? Xiao Su held the bowl and raised his eyebrows at her. When Chu Qingyin heard these threatening words, she felt a little unsure. She felt that in the end, she would definitely compromise under his obscenity. Since that was the case, why not fight for some benefits for herself? I can drink the medicine, but I have a condition. Chu Qingyin stuck out her little head again, revealing a pair of ears and a pair of bright and spirited eyes. This is your own body. Xiao Su looked at her indifferently. That's my body. I make the decision. I don't want to drink it. Chu Qingyin proudly retorted. Say it. What's the condition? Xiao Su's eyes flashed with helplessness. I want to eat osmanthus cake tonight, she said loudly, then carefully glanced at him. Xiao Su thought of Cheng Yinluo's words today. The little fellow didn't need to avoid eating anything. So, he nodded. I'll prepare a plate of osmanthus cake for you every day, but you have to finish the medicine. Moreover, you can't refuse to drink the medicine until you go to Jiang. Deal? Chu Qingyin smiled proudly. Sure enough, acting spoiled and cute was the most useful. However, Xining, who knew the truth, covered her face. She wanted to tell her master the good news, but, Master, this servant can only say that you've been tricked by His Highness. Chapter 297. Due to the increasing number of patients in the clinic, Cheng Yinluo didn't have time to take care of Chu Qingyin, so she left it to Xiao Su. Thus, Ethereal was in charge of the follow-up. Chu Qingyin nibbled on the fruit in her hand. She had heard that Huoling and the others had picked it when they were patrolling the mountains. She looked down at Ethereal, who was seriously checking her pulse, and blurted out, Have you explained things clearly to Yinluo? Ethereal's hand paused. He looked away and said, I don't think I can explain things clearly. When she heard Ethereal's discouraged words, Chu Qingyin took a big bite of the fruit and said angrily, I knew you couldn't settle it. Aren't you always efficient? Why are you so wishy-washy when it comes to matters of the heart? Chu Qingyin's shameless boasting right now would give her the urge to dig a hole and hide in it when she thought of this day many years later. Ethereal felt defeated. I don't have a choice. Once little Yin has decided on something, there's no way to change it. Forget it, forget it. Let me give you a suggestion. Chu Qingyin felt that if she continued to watch the two of them struggle, she, as an outsider, was afraid that she would be dragged into the game. Ethereal was curious. Young Princess Consort, what kind of suggestion do you have? What kind of suggestion could this person, who didn't even reach his chest, have? I have 3 treasures here. The first is to cry, the second is to throw a tantrum, and the third is to hang oneself. Chu Qingyin narrowed her eyes and smiled. Ethereal's expression turned ugly. Are you sure this isn't a method that women usually use? Don't you think that your junior sister Xiaoyan is more suitable for this kind of tactic? Chu Qingyin looked at him seriously. Young Princess Consort, I have other matters to attend to. I'll take my leave first. Ethereal felt that his brain must be fried for him to think of discussing such matters with the young Princess Consort. Okay. I have another idea. Chu Qingyin hurriedly asked him to stay. Ethereal looked at her suspiciously this time. Chu Qingyin cleared her throat and then said to him seriously, First, you are shameless. Second, you are determined to be shameless. Third, you are extremely shameless. As soon as she said this, the ethereal had already withered in the wind. He couldn't even finish a sentence before he left. Little Princess Consort, this subordinate will take his leave. Hey, Chu Qingyin wanted to stop him, but he ran faster than a rabbit. Chu Qingyin felt frustrated. She took a bite of the fruit and said angrily, Damn it, I worried for nothing. Don't you know that this is a very famous saying? His words are crude, But his reasoning is not crude. What famous words? Xiao Su walked in from outside and heard her muttering. Chu Qingyan coughed lightly and immediately changed the topic. Big ice cube. This fruit is very delicious. Do you want one too? Xiao Su knew her temperament and didn't ask any more questions. We can set off for Jiang country tomorrow, Xiao Su said. Chu Qingyan, who had just finished eating the fruit, was looking for a brocade cloth to wipe her hands when she heard this news. She couldn't help but smile. We can finally set off. We've been delayed for 4 to 5 days. No rush. If it's fated, it will be there. If it's not fated, don't force it. Xiao Su picked up the brocade cloth from the shelf and sat on the couch to wipe her fingers. Chu Qingyan looked at him, carefully wiping the juice off her hands, and felt a little emotional. The person who gave her the cold shoulder when they first met, she never thought that there would be a day when he would take care of her so carefully. I will definitely let you live. If it's not fated, I will snatch it for you. Chu Qingyan had a determined expression, looking like she would fight with her life on the line. Xiao Su shook his head and said with a smile, with you like this, it's good enough if you don't get crushed to pieces. Big ice cube, how can you be like this? Can't you speak properly? Chu Qingyan felt like her heart had been pierced by an arrow. Xiao Su spread his hands. If she didn't want him to speak the truth, then he wouldn't say it. Chu Qingyan was amused by his attitude. However, what he said was indeed the truth. Right now, even protecting herself was a problem, and she still hoped to fight with her life on the line. To put it bluntly, she was overestimating herself. Then she chuckled and said, Big ice cube, don't be afraid. I will really do what I say. These words were much more serious and sloppy than before, but Xiao Su could hear the seriousness hidden in her joke. He wanted to laugh at her, but he couldn't bear to say it. In the end, he raised his hand and stroked her hair. It was better not to hurt a child's enthusiasm too much, or she would lose her ambition in the future. She knew that the big ice cube didn't have high hopes for her, but she didn't want to be looked down upon like this. Perhaps in the past, she did want to be a leech, but that was already in the past. What she wanted to do most now was to protect his health. So, no matter the price, she had to do it. In a corner where Xiao Su couldn't see, Chu Qingyan's eyes flashed with determination. Capital's imperial city. In the quiet imperial study, Sichuan Emperor opened the secret report he had just received. It was written on it, the King of England has been poisoned by Snake's Kiss. The whereabouts of his body are unknown. He was very clear about the toxicity of Snake's Kiss. A trace of pain flashed across his face, but it was quickly replaced by relief. He put away the secret report, then lowered his head and asked the person kneeling on the ground, What did your lord say? My lord said that he shot the arrow with his own hands and saw the King of England being poisoned with his own eyes. So, the King of England should be gone. The man in black bowed his head and replied. Sichuan Emperor nodded, but he was still a little worried. In the past, he had been able to escape from death in the battles at the border. So, he ordered, Go and tell your lord that if he's alive, I want to see his body. Yes. The man in black retreated. Sichuan Emperor sat quietly on the dragon throne, and a complicated expression appeared on his face. During this period of time, the people he had sent out had written to him to inform him of Su Er's disappearance. But only he knew what this disappearance meant. But when he actually received the letter, he still felt a little absent-minded. For so many years, it wasn't that he hadn't deliberately tried to weaken Su Er's power, but he could only watch him climb to the top of power step by step. Everyone knew that he had an outstanding prince named Xiao Su, the first prince of the Sichuan royal family, and the King of England praised by the people. Now, all the ministers wanted him to appoint a crown prince. He knew that the ministers in the court were also discerning. Seeing that his eldest son had made great achievements, his character and knowledge were excellent, and his fourth son had begun to show his talent, the two of them would have a fight sooner or later. In order to avoid bloodshed, they proposed to appoint a crown prince at this time. As for him, he had only thought of this method because he was forced to the point where he had no other choice. The scene of that day surfaced in his mind. When he was in the imperial study and talked with Su Er, who had just been released from prison, he didn't seem surprised at all. Now that he thought about it, Sichuan Emperor understood. This child was still too smart. But a mountain cannot accommodate two tigers. Born in the royal family, you must be prepared to be sacrificed. I hope you don't blame your imperial father for being cruel. Chapter 298. What? Xiao Su disappeared? Imperial concubine Moon listened to the words of the black-cloaked man in front of her, and her face was filled with surprise and joy. That's right. The assassin group I sent out didn't succeed in assassinating Xiao Su, but he seems to have provoked a lot of enemies. One of them, who was dressed in a cloak, shot an arrow through Xiao Su's chest. I heard that he has been poisoned and is not far from death, the black-cloaked man said in a flat tone. That's great. Xiao Su is finally dead. Huh? I've waited for so many years, and now I've finally realized this wish of mine. I can finally hold my head up high. Imperial concubine Moon laughed out loud. Because of her joy, her dignified and beautiful face became a bit fierce. The black-cloaked man looked at her and could not help but sigh softly, drawing her attention back to the present. However, don't be too happy just yet. The members of the assassin group have yet to find his body. Everything can only be confirmed after they find his body. Good. It's best if he dies without a burial place. I heard that there are many jackals, wolves, tigers, and leopards in that kind of forest. If we're not careful. Consort Yu's smile was terrifying. The cloaked man didn't say anything else. He turned to leave, but Consort Yu called out to him. You've worked hard this time. I heard that the people from your sect were injured because of this. Consort Yu stopped smiling and asked worriedly. You're welcome. They were only injured because they weren't as skilled. There's nothing much to say. Also, I told you before that if you need me, you can send people to the Moon Palace to find me, the cloaked man said calmly. When the black figure left the palace, Consort Yu was a little disappointed. Senior Marshal Brother, do you still care about how I insisted on entering the palace back then? But her eyes shone brightly. Everything that I wanted back then is slowly gathering in my hands now. Liang Yuan, I said before that one day, I will take back everything that belongs to me. First, it was your precious son. Next, it will be you. That pair of gentle eyes revealed a hint of ruthlessness. Chu Qingyan didn't know how many people thousands of miles away were hoping that they would die halfway. She held a plate of pastries and sat in the courtyard, basking in the sun. Recently, she had been staying in her room. If she didn't get some sun, she would get moldy. Xining walked to her side with a cup of tea, then saw her master staring at a certain place and laughing. She couldn't help but follow her gaze. He saw Hua Ling and Mu Ling bringing Xiao Lai Chi and the others to repair the roof of the thatched hut. And mistress this, the usually aloof and unapproachable Xiao Lai Chi was doing this kind of thing after resigning. She couldn't help but be dumbfounded. Chu Qingyan saw Xining's behavior. She couldn't accept that a tall, rich, and handsome man was doing such a down-to-earth thing. Chu Qingyan took a bite of the pastry and said disapprovingly, Don't make a fuss. Anyway, they are idle. Why don't they do something meaningful? Hearing the young princess consort's evaluation, Hua Ling and the others felt wronged. At this moment, Xiao Su walked over. Hua Ling and the others thought that they saw their savior and immediately shouted, Mistress, we are here. Xiao Su glanced at them. Then there was no more. Hua Ling and the others froze. Normally, shouldn't he ask what they were doing up there? Then they could logically tell him that the heartless young princess consort had called them to repair the roof. But, there were no buts. Mistress was becoming less and less concerned about them. The injured Hua Ling and the others could only quietly repair the roof. It's windy outside. Don't run around. Xiao Su reminded them and went in. Chu Qingyan waved her paws at his back, then continued to eat the pastries. At this moment, an angry Cheng Yinluo strode over. Chu Qingyan saw that the situation was not good and wanted to run away, but the other party obviously noticed her intention. She strode over and blocked her way. Chu Qingyan chuckled and immediately raised the plate in her hand. She smiled and said, Sister Yinluo, My Huang, he makes delicious pastries. Do you want to try them? Cheng Yin Luo imitated her smile, then pushed away her plate with one hand and tapped her forehead with her index finger. She said aggressively, "Tell me the truth. What did you say to that bastard Murong Ju? Why does he seem to be a different person?" "Nothing." Chu Qingyin shook her head guiltily, but she was more curious about what Ethereal did. How did he become a different person? Tell me and I'll help you analyze it. Cheng Luo was furious when she heard that. I don't know who said something to him, but he suddenly became obsessed. He follows me around all day long. Other than going to the toilet, he's inseparable from me. He won't say anything when I ask him, and he won't leave even if I chase him away. I can't help but want to stab him with those needles. Chu Qingyin could not help but laugh when she heard that. She felt that Kong Ling was very good at carrying out his request, even though he said that he was unwilling. This shameless move was really well used. Seeing Cheng Yinluo's chest heaving up and down in anger, Chu Qingyin felt that she seemed more real now, unlike before when she smiled, which gave people a sense of distance. She couldn't help but add fuel to the fire. Then why don't you give him a needle? Maybe he won't dare to do it if he's scared. Cheng Yinluo snorted. Do you think I can't bear to do it? If it weren't for the fact that I'm worried that something bad might happen to him, I would have suffered a great loss if he still didn't leave. Chu Qingyin nodded suspiciously. She took a bite of a pastry and said vaguely, "Then you can deal with him. It's useless to talk to me." Cheng Yinluo frowned. "You really don't know anything?" Chu Qingyin looked like an obedient child as she stood at attention and said sincerely, "I dare to swear that I did not teach him to shamelessly follow you around. She had only taught him to be shameless when it came to doing things." Only then did Cheng Yinluo withdraw her suspicion. However, Murong Ju's behavior really gave her a headache. He was usually a modest gentleman, but now he did such a shameless thing. She didn't know what he had learned in the past 6 years. "Sister Yinluo, what do you think about going to the Jiang Kingdom last time?" Chu Qingyin mentioned it again with a smile. "I don't think." Cheng Yinluo was about to reject it without thinking, but Chu Qingyin interrupted her in time. "Sister Yinluo, since Ethereal has wronged you for so many years, haven't you thought of getting back at him?" Chu Qingyin winked at her. "Since we've already decided not to contact each other, why bother to pester him?" Cheng Yinluo curled her lips and showed a touch of sarcasm. Since ancient times, love was left with regret, and this regret was endless. Chu Qingyin shrugged. "Let's skip this topic first. By the way, didn't you say that Ethereal has been following you? Where is he?" Chu Qingyin looked for him for a long time, but didn't see him. Cheng Yinluo smiled. "I just put croton in his soup." Chu Qingyin shuddered. This sister was so scary. Chapter 299. Chu Qingyin coughed lightly. If Yin Luo knew that she was the mastermind behind Ethereal's scheme, wouldn't it be a problem that could be solved with a little croton? She suddenly shivered. She decided to seek warmth from the big ice cube. However, Chu Qingyin fell into deep thought as she watched Yin Luo leave with light steps. Ethereal wasn't someone who would be easily drugged, and Yin Luo wasn't someone who liked to use underhanded means to bully others. In that case, the two of them were actually just Chu Qingyin stood up and brushed off the crumbs on her clothes. She leisurely said to Xining, "Do you know what it means when one is willing to hit and the other is willing to be hit?" "No, I don't." Xining looked eager to learn. Chu Qingyin felt that it was better not to lead a child astray, so she patted Xining's head. "You're still young." Xining looked like she was withering in the cold wind. "Master, aren't you and this servant about the same age?" In the forest, Higashio Motetsu was nestled in a tree, looking up at the sparse stars in the sky. He held a leaf in his hand and put it to his lips, softly playing it. His voice was like the cool breeze in the cold moon, drifting in the air, quiet and mellow. He played this tune for a long time until the moon was hanging in the sky. Only then did he move the leaf away from his lips and play with it in his hand. "Young master, it's been a long time since I've heard you play this leaf. It's still so pleasant to the ear. It can be said that it will linger in the ears for 3 days without stopping. 3 days without the taste of meat." Xuanqi Zimo walked out from a corner and praised unceasingly. Higashio Motetsu glanced at him and said indifferently, "Speak human language. Young master, your demonic sound has successfully made others retreat." Chuanchi Zimo laughed bitterly. Higashio Motetsu snorted coldly. These brats don't even know music, yet they dare to despise this young master. Chuanchi Zimo pretended not to understand. "All right, let's get down to business," Higashio Motetsu said faintly. Only then did Chuanchi Zimo get down to business. This subordinate has made some inquiries. Miss Chu is already safe and sound. Young master need not worry. Did I say I was worried about her? Daunting Wang Yu let out a sigh of relief when she heard that Su Qingsang was fine. However, she felt embarrassed and said coldly, "I understand. You're not worried about Miss Chu at all." But as soon as he finished speaking, his master rolled his eyes at him. Chuanchi Zimo felt that he couldn't tell the truth or lie. Why was it so difficult to be a subordinate these days? "Have you heard anything else?" Higashio Motetsu leisurely leaned against the tree trunk with a relaxed expression. He was no longer as impatient as before. "Yes, the King of England and the others are leaving for the Jiang Kingdom tomorrow. Should we follow them?" Chuanchi Zimo asked. "Of course, why wouldn't we? We haven't gotten the item yet. Since it's not in the prince's estate, it must be with him or hidden by him." Higashio Motetsu sat up and took out the folding fan at his waist. He opened it with a snap and waved it leisurely. Chuanchi Zimo hesitated. "Master, this subordinate has something to ask, but I'm not sure if it's appropriate." "If you don't know, don't ask." Higashio Motetsu looked at him disdainfully. When did he become so wishy-washy? Chuanchi Zimo choked. Under normal circumstances, shouldn't he be asking questions? It seemed that he still couldn't use common sense to judge his master. Seeing his subordinate's conflicted expression, Higashio Motetsu couldn't stand it any longer. He generously said, "All right, you may ask." Only then did Chuanchi Zimo heave a sigh of relief. He raised his head and asked sincerely, "Young master, when we were in the forest, you originally planned to hold Miss Chu hostage and force the King of England to hand over the item. But in the end, you just watched Miss Chu leave. A few days ago, Miss Chu fainted from a high fever. That was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Why didn't you use that opportunity to force the King of England to hand over the item? This subordinate doesn't understand. Why did you let go of those opportunities again and again?" Higashio Motetsu was slightly stunned by his subordinate's words. He even forgot to wave the folding fan in his hand. Then, when he felt his subordinate's puzzled gaze, he closed the fan and said with a serious expression, "That's because this young master doesn't like to use this method to get things. Do you understand? But you've done it many times in the past." Chuanchi Zimo muttered softly. But how could his words escape his young master's ears? "Xian, Shi, Z, Mo." When his young master called out his name in such a tone, he knew that he had said something he shouldn't have again. This subordinate still has things to do. "I'll take my leave first." He ran away like a wisp of smoke. But what was that sharp weapon that tore through the air right after him? Chuanchi Zimo immediately decided to lie down on the ground. A leaf brushed past his face and nailed itself to the trunk of a tree. Then a strand of black hair floated in front of him. Heavens, I finally dodged it. Even after the surroundings returned to silence, Higashio Motetsu's subordinate's question still echoed in his ears. Why? Honestly speaking, he didn't know either. Perhaps he really didn't want to use this method on a little girl. Moreover, the road ahead was long. He might as well enjoy while he searched. In any case, he wasn't in a hurry. He waved the peach blossom fan. In a temple in Sichuan, a clean and pure white figure had his back to the door. He held a small wooden stick in his hand and was lightly beating a wooden fish. One of his hands was wearing Buddhist prayer beads, and his palm was facing the side. He closed his eyes and calmly chanted. If one listened carefully, they would be able to tell that he was chanting the Great Compassion Mantra. The candlelight flickered, but it didn't affect him at all. He continued to chant the mantra peacefully. "Uncle Master, the Emperor of Jiang Country has sent a letter inviting you to Jiang Country. This is the invitation." The novice monk handed the invitation to him. Hearing this, Su Jian chanted, "Amit Ba." Then he put down the small wooden stick in his hand and slowly stood up. He took the invitation, opened it, and closed it. This invitation came at the right time. A faint smile appeared in Su Jian's emotionless eyes. He walked out of the hall and looked up at the night sky. A few days ago, he observed the stars at night and found that the star beside the sun of heaven was gradually dimming. It was almost invisible, but recently, that star seemed to have a tendency to light up again. It was just that compared to before, it was still much dimmer. He had already guessed what was going on. Wu Ming, help Uncle Master prepare the things for the trip. He turned and smiled at the novice monk. The novice monk asked curiously, "How long will Uncle Master be gone?" Uncle Master doesn't know either. Su Jian put his palms together and looked up at the star in the sky again. Ever since he met the benefactress, many things had begun to change. If he guessed correctly, the star should have fallen. However, someone had woken it up and it had regained its light. He hoped that all of this wouldn't be the beginning of a massacre. Su Jian closed his eyes and chanted in a low voice, "Amitabha, my Buddha is merciful. Namo, he luo na, de luo yi, namo, aya, poluji emperor, shuabo luo yi." That you're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.